Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the RFGeneration Community playthrough wrap-up for September 2014. I'm your host, Rich. We've got an exciting show this month. We are discussing two very popular titles, Ico for the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and Suikoden II, which unfortunately was only released on the PlayStation 1. In the Ico discussion, I'll be joined by all of the usual co-hosts, Floyd, Shawn, and Jamie, as we all finish the game this month. And on the retro side, Shawn takes a turn at hosting the Suikoden II segment and is rejoined by our guest from the Suikoden podcast, RFGeneration's own Sir Ico. Please remember, you can find this podcast on YouTube and download it from Podomatic and iTunes. Also, remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter if you haven't already, so that you can discuss the show with us. And as always, you can leave us feedback or discuss these games further on rfgeneration.com. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy the show.
For our September community playthrough, again we switched sides and I ended up on the retro side while Rich took the modern side. We went back to a series that we played a couple months ago, which was Suikoden on the original PlayStation. For September we did Suikoden II. And despite much enthusiasm and a great playthrough on the first game, the Suikoden II playthrough was not nearly as successful. And there are a few reasons for this, and we should just get them out of the way before we discuss the game. Number one, the game is largely very rare and very expensive. Although a lot of people claim that they had copies of the game or were willing to shell out for a copy of the game because of how much they liked the first game, we only had 7 people actually sign up, and most of them didn't post past the post in which they signed up for the playthrough. Also, when having played as many RPGs as we've played recently, having just done the original Suikoden and Chrono Trigger, looking at a 40 to 60 hour RPG to play in September is a little bit of a daunting task. And I believe that's why many of our members of the 7 who signed up, I believe only Doug Lee 007 is going to finish the game, and he's not posting a lot about the game. He's kind of lost in the game. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to take the opportunity now. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce my guest who's with me today, our resident evil,
yes.
Our resident
Keep that.
Our resident Suikoden expert on RF Generation, Sir Ico. Ico, welcome back to the show.
All right, and this is Grey Ghost right here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Grey Ghost 81, as you know me on the forum. So now that I got all my nervousness of actually hosting a segment kind of out of the way and all the mess ups, let's talk about Suikoden 2. And Ico, if you have anything to add, we were discussing a little bit before we got on the air the failures of the playthrough. If you have anything to add, and I don't mean to disparage any, like we have had good months and bad months. We've had, for every Parasite Eve, we have a Crazy Taxi. For our Suikoden 1, now we have a Suikoden 2. It didn't go as well. And that's what's going to happen when you're on we're in kind of a small community. The message board doesn't move very fast. It's not that much traffic. So when you get 6 or 7 people together that say they're going to play a game, and it happens to be this massive RPG that we expected everybody to play in a month, which maybe that's another reason. If we did a game this long, it should have been 2 months.
Oh, yeah, you can beat this in 20 hours if you skip everything.
But who wants to skip everything,
Oh, and that's if you're going for Clive's Quest.
Right. Well, even as I was saying it when we played the first game, I got more into it the second time I played it, and it gets addictive trying to recruit everybody. And it's, again, a very open-ended game. And speaking of which, you mentioned off the air that there really should have been checkpoints, and I totally own up to that as the host of the game. I kind of bailed on the checkpoints when, after playing in the first week before the playthrough actually started, I didn't get far enough into the game to post a first week's checkpoint, and I kind of just copped out and said, well, there's going to be no checkpoints. And I think that kind of left everybody where they could have used a little bit of guidance for that kind of motivation.
I know you asked me about the halfway point, and other than week 3, I think I would have had some pretty good checkpoints for everybody.
Right. And, I'm with that, and I wish I'd have asked you sooner. And I only asked at the midway point because the thread was already on life support by then, and I needed something.
Yeah, it was just me trying to be as funny as possible.
Right. Yeah, so... Sir Psycho, thank you for at least trying to put some relevant information on the thread for the game. But anyway, let's enough kicking ourselves for how bad the playthrough went. This still is an amazing game, and still, if you didn't participate in our playthrough, you didn't finish the game for the playthrough, highly encourage that you go and play this game, pick it up, especially if you played the first one with us. It's definitely a classic RPG of all time. And, with that said, let's get into actually the game itself and what makes the game great.
Yeah, this game, when it first came out, it was kind of received with a lukewarm review scores and a reception. But as time went on, it's kind of become sort of the Earthbound of the PS1, in that game that really becomes loved after the system's life cycle, as people go back and discover it and realize, this is fantastic.
That's a very good analogy, and I found it kind of surprising that it got the lukewarm reviews that it did, and I saw it noted somewhere that a lot of people said it was too similar to the first game, and I wonder if these reviewers spent enough time with Suikoden II to realize
it's much different.
Not only is it much different, but how many improvements were made on, the promises of the first game. You know what I mean? Like, as we discussed in the segment for Suikoden 1 of the podcast, there were so many, there weren't like things, major problems with Suikoden 1, but you could see as you were playing it, the room for improvement. And I feel like Suikoden 2 basically delivered on everything that even as playing Suikoden 1, you felt like, they could have done this better.
Oh, yes. I know back in the first one, a lot of people complained about inventory, and that was completely revamped in number 2 to the point where a lot of the headache of managing individual inventories for every single character is pretty much gone. You basically have your armor slots, and then you have 3 extra item slots where you can put accessories and healing items, or scrolls, which are basically magic spells, so that you can heal up or do damage in a pinch. And the whole rune system was completely revamped too. In the first one, you could have 2 runes on a character. One on their weapon, and then one on their person. And if somebody already came with a rune, they were probably locked from one of those. So in Suikoden 2, you had a possibility of 4 runes now, with rune slots on the head and each hand, and then the weapon slot as well. And there's some pretty cool stuff you can get on the weapons. I actually got the silence rune in this game, which is, you only get it at one point in time. You have to have it drop from a very specific set of Highland soldiers at a very specific point in the game. And if you miss it, you never have a chance to get it again. But I got it in this playthrough, and then I silenced the bosses, and it was awesome.
Is that a traditional silence, just meaning that they can't cast after you use it on them?
Yeah, they can't use magic, which a lot of the bosses have magic that will affect the entire party. So you negate that, and they're limited to their physical attacks. And it was pretty much slicing their hamstring.
That's awesome. So another major improvement that was made in the game would be the graphics. even though the first game had some great sprite work, some awesome environments, some really great attention to detail, the second game just blew this out of the water. Even the character portraits were a lot sharper. The animations on the sprites, they added however many more frames it was or whatever. And everything in this game is just really beautiful and pops off the screen, even more so than the first game.
Oh yeah, the graphics were really a big step up. The backgrounds kind of have the same 3D look in battles as the first game, and then you have the moving camera comes back, but it just seems like everything's a bit more detailed. Right,
and speaking of the moving camera, it might just be me, but I felt that it was a little bit more dynamic, especially in some of those special attack animations, which, y'all know that I love those. I mentioned that a few times on this show. While we're on graphics, another major improvement that I know you wanted to talk about was the music. And I know you were big on the music on the first game, and I know how you feel on the music here. Why don't you elaborate a little on that?
Basically, in the first game, there's a lot of short loops. So it's not like the songs are bad, but they play so much to where they get ground into your head, and you kind of find them annoying after a little while. But the first game, or the second game now, everything has its own theme. And I know a lot of people from the first one kind of complained about headquarters, because it's like a minute-long loop and you spend so much time there, and it's a really obnoxious little theme. But now your headquarters has a really nice, soothing kind of number that is pretty relaxing to just kind of roam around in. And also, the headquarters has changed immensely for number 2. In the first one, you kind of just took up residence in this little hollow piece of rock in the middle of a lake, and you just kind of carved crap onto it. But in number 2, you basically take a ruined village and rebuild it, and it really feels like it's a village. There's people that roam around town. You can see your stars of destiny walking down the street. Sometimes they'll be in a bar. Other times they'll be watching your dancer. Sometimes they're running away from other stars of destiny, like how Flick is always running away from Nina. And it just feels a lot more live.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Obviously, there's a lot of recurring characters from the first game. And what is it? It's supposed to be 10 years, correct me if I'm wrong?
Yes? It's actually only 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, 3 years after the events of the first game. So you have a lot of recurring characters continuing their own stories. And many of them are recruitable to your cause.
And then there's a point, for those that played 1, this is kind of a spoiler, but you go on a diplomatic mission to Gregminster, which you remember playing there from Suikoden 1. Mm-hmm. And President Mustache is there. Basically, your hero from the first game becomes president, and then just walks out, and then LaPont fills his shoes. Because who can deny LaPont and his massive mustache?
That's right. Okay, so while we're on the subject of the castles and the people, I guess we could talk a little bit about how the battle systems, some stayed the same largely, and some had some major changes. And I'll just say that the normal battle system stays largely the same, right? You have your 6-on-6 with, like you said, the 3D backgrounds with the sprites on them. It's kind of the same as the first game. The menus are a little bit better, and then you have the same dynamic camera jumping all around, the familiar sound effects even. The duels also are largely the same, but you know what? I want to let you talk about the other 2 battle systems, because I'm going to be honest, especially when we get to the strategic ones, I leaned on Apple so much that I felt like I wasn't actually playing those strategy portions. So if you could just talk about the duels and the strategy battles.
Yeah, the duels are mostly the same. They say something, and that means they're going to do that specific attack based on what they say. And then you have to counter it, rock, paper, scissors style, like in the first game. But the strategic system is entirely different. In the first game, they're basically staring each other down, and then you pick from a menu what you want to do. If you want to use any specific skills to give you an advantage, if you want to know what your enemy does, you just use ninjas and win. In the second game, it's pretty much like playing Fire Emblem.
Yeah, it is. You know, you have your units on a grid and you move them to attack, and it really is just a strategy game. And I think you mentioned in the last podcast that it could have been a game all its own if they had, you know, just expanded it, made more battles out of it. It could have been its own strategy game.
Yeah, it's definitely not as deep as a Fire Emblem or a Shining Force. It only pops up occasionally, then I think it does the job really well. And there's all kinds of different types of units, too, so there is some depth there. Like, you have infantry, you have cavalry, you have archers, mounted archers, you have magicians. You got all kinds of people. And each one is stronger against another type, and you get those cool animations. I posted some screenshots of it early on in the playthrough before we realized it was completely dead.
So it's the same kind of principles of one thing beats another, correct? Like just a more complex version of that?
Yeah, there's some dice rolling, so it's not always cavalry is going to beat infantry, but it's probably going to do pretty decent when it's in melee range against archers. You know, you can have Victor. There's a video on YouTube of somebody just using Victor and only Victor and winning, like, the last battle.
Wow, that's pretty insane.
Yeah, because Victor's super OP in this game.
Right.
At least in the strategy section. And you'll notice each unit kind of has its own attack and defense stat. That's not really set in stone. Like I said, there's some dice rolling going on. A 12 isn't always going to beat a 10.
All right, so let's get into the story, I guess, unless you have anything more to say about any of the types of the battle systems.
Not really. Most of the early ones are pretty scripted, so you only have like one unit to control, whereas the AI takes over the rest. So even having Apple do everything for you, she's only doing a little bit. Everyone else is doing what they're pre-programmed to do. But when in the end of the game, when it opens up, then it becomes really satisfying to control everybody and have them do exactly what you want to do.
Right.
Especially since Shu is awesome. And for those that didn't really play, but you played the first game, Shu is the strategist, so he's basically Matthew's replacement.
Right. Okay. All right. So as for the story, like you said, continuing 3 years after the events of the first game, and we start in an army camp, and I'm going to be honest, all the political, I know there's like, it's kind of a similar story to the first game, right? There's a city-state, there's an imperial army, there's another army. Like, I'm an idiot when it comes to this stuff, but I actually, and I'll get into this actually after you explain the military stuff. I was always more connected with the three main characters of this game. So could you just give me a rundown of like who was fighting who, like from the army's perspective?
All right. When the game starts off, you are Rio and Joey Atreides, and you hail from Chiaro in the Kingdom of Highland. And so you start off, you're in the Unicorn Brigade, which is basically like a youth training unit for the military of Highland. And then the game pretty much kicks off with a bang from there. But there's also the city-states of Joustin, which various different cities, and all of them have their own military style and their own political style. Highland is the aggressor, so you actually start being a member of an invading force, but the whole purpose behind the invasion is unveiled right at the start of the game. Because basically what you hear is that the populations on both sides of the war are tired of fighting. The people just get really weary of war, so they want it to end. But then Prince Luca Blight, he's not the king yet, but Prince Luca comes in and slaughters the Unicorn Brigade, his own soldiers, and then blames it on the city-states to get the support of the population back for his war. And then also gives him a chance to catch the city-state with its pants down, because they think that Highland is gonna. I think that Highland is going to respect the peace treaty they just signed, and Luca has no intentions of doing that. That's kind of the whole startup for the game. And then Ryu and Joey are basically the only ones that escape. You don't run into anyone else that escaped. And then Ryu gets taken prisoner by our good buddies from Suikoden I, Victor and Flick, who are running a mercenary company under the employ of Muse, one of the city-states. And then the whole game starts from there. But you get to see really good characters right from the beginning. You get to see the villainous nature of Luca Blight within 5 minutes of you starting the game, and his right-hand bumbler who can't do anything right, Captain Roud.
Right. And I must say, Luca Blight, to me, is one of the most sinister and evil villains that I can think of in a video game. And I know there are many, video games run on sinister and evil villains.
Kafka.
Right. I've actually never played Final Fantasy VI, but I know all about Kafka.
He's just a ripoff of Palamisia from FF2, but whatever. I'll go into that.
Okay.
I'll go into that another day.
I'll take your word for it. All right. But the scene with Luca Blight where he's telling the woman to squeal like a pig and then he strikes her down anyway was so shocking to me.
Yeah, and then just like 10 minutes later, right after you fight him at the fort, he's about ready to slice a little 4-year-old girl's neck.
That's a testament to this game, and maybe at least in my opinion, how that can be like so shocking and visceral to see from like a little sprite on the screen with some text. The emotion that the programmers evoked, and that the animators could portray. It's just amazing. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like it, even in a modern game.
It just gets crazier and crazier. There's a point.
Right.
There's a point later in the game where he beheads one of his own generals because he fails to attack your headquarters right after you establish it, and you're at your weakest. But Shu is a genius and managed to win. And then we're skipping ahead, but
You can skip ahead. No, feel free. Go for it.
There's a lot that happens in between. Muse gets attacked. Victor's girlfriend was like the mayor of Muse. And so you get to see Victor, this giant bear of a man, and he has a crush on the red-headed mayor of Muse. And then you get a really awesome plot twist out of this whole game, which one of the running themes of this game is destiny. Because you hear about, there was a war between Highland and the city-states, like 30, 40 years ago, before the game. The leaders of that war were Han Cunningham on Highland and Genkaku for the city-states. And Ryo and his adopted sister Nanami studied under a man named Genkaku, who basically just lived in the country right next to some town and taught them martial arts. And he was content with that after fighting a war and being one of the leading men behind it. So at the beginning of the game, you get teased all the time by being like, oh, we're going to tell you about Genkaku. Oh, well, she died, so we can't hear from her. And then Victor finally tells you after you get your headquarters. So there's all kinds of stuff that happens really quickly after the mercenary camp falls. And then you end up finally establishing your headquarters. You beat the crap out of Solon G. Solon G gets its head chopped off. And then the assassination was actually done by Joey, our best friend. And then he somehow, despite being labeled a traitor, gets really close to Luca and then ends up being Solon G's replacement. The thing about Genkaku and Han is that they were said to be best friends. So before a battle, they would get together in between the army camps and just drink tea and play chess or whatever it is they wanted to do. So you have basically have the same thing happening. Two best friends on the opposite side of a war, and they both have the same runes that their predecessors have. Again, the runes play a pivotal role in the story and the flow of this game and the series.
Yeah, it's all about the... now, correct me if I'm wrong, the runes run through the whole series as well as the Stars of Destiny. I think you've mentioned that in the previous show. Each
game generally has a different rune, but you'll see some that recur. I think the only one that makes it through the first 3 is Luke and his true wind rune.
Okay. So yeah, there's definitely, for a game that can be incredibly long, it is very well paced, and there is a lot going on. Again, so much so that a lot of it could some of it went over my head. Again, I was more into the characters of the main character and Joey and Nanami, who's the main character's sister, and their relationships together. I actually just wanted to throw in, as a quick aside, we could talk about the optional, now there's 2 possible outcomes at the end of the game, 2 endings, but I actually want to talk about the quit halfway through the game ending.
You can basically just decide to run away with Nanami, and then stuff goes down.
Right, exactly. And this is kind of a crazy thing to have in a game like this, but I did it. I had I had 2 saves going, so I said, well, let me try it. And I thought that's kind of crazy. It's like, all right, you could just let me give up, but it definitely leaves you with a feeling you do not feel like you did the right thing. And again, that's how effective the drama is in this game. You could never leave the game like that and walk away from it.
Yeah, definitely. That ending really makes you feel like you failed.
Exactly. On the other hand, you can understand the temptations of the character to not have this, the burden of the war, on them, and not wanting to risk their lives and the lives of their loved ones. But it's I just thought it was an interesting thing. It's not the only game in the world that has that. There are other games that have optional, I was going to say trapdoor, but I guess I mean like a side door ending to a game. But this is one of those games, and it's pretty interesting. So yeah, I don't know what else we can hit on. I'm afraid, in this segment of the show, Psycho, we just recorded Suikoden 1. The games are, as much as it's improved, as much as it's very different in a lot of ways, it's very similar in a lot of ways, and I don't want to just retread everything from the first show. But I wonder, just open-endedly, is there anything else you want to throw in here, about the story, the characters, the systems, anything?
I would say that the first part of the game that I just kind of did a quick rundown of is really it's a great part of the game, but it just continues to get better and better. Every event you go to, every town you go to feels important. It has something that you have to do there, and it's not always exactly how you would expect it to unfold, and that's really the way the game keeps you on your toes. So, you're trying to get the rest of the city-states that haven't fallen, or that have fallen, liberated, or keeping them away from being directly controlled by Highland. And, after Muse, you go to South Window, and then they get taken over pretty quickly, right after you get there. And then you have to basically just win the area back. Then you go to Two River, you spend some time in Green Hill, and that's where you run into Joey for the first time after he becomes a general. Then Matilda, after that, you're trying to ally with the Knights, which has the most militaristic city. You kind of want them on your side, but their leader is a massive douchebag who has some backdoor dealings with Highland. You figure that out.
Right.
But basically half of his knights rebel against him and join you anyway, so it all works out.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, there's the side quest with Humphrey and Fleach, which a lot of the first game players will remember. And they'll also remember Fleach's dragon. Well,
right.
This whole side quest ends up with you getting Fleach a new dragon. But you don't expect it, because dragons aren't supposed to be on mountains. They're supposed to be in caves. But you find this dragon egg, and then it hatches right after you beat this boss. And it's the complete opposite of black. It's a white dragon with blue eyes. And you can make some Yu-Gi-Oh jokes right there if you want. But Fleach names the dragon Bright, And Fleach actually comes back in Suikoden 3, and Bright is all grown up. And Suikoden 3's battle system is designed in a different way than number 2. You can end up with characters mounted. There's a griffin that your main character can mount, and Fleach can mount up on Bright. And,
Okay.
And then you have different battle options with the mounting compared to when they're separate. But watching Fleach grow up from being like a young, hot-headed kid with a smart mouth to, in Suikoden 3, being a teacher is a really interesting story. And Suikoden 2 is the bridge between the two.
Right, that's pretty cool. And you know, as I mentioned in the first show, that he was one of my favorite side, characters. So it's cool to hear that he continues on in the series. I haven't played anything beyond these first 2 games, so I've always been looking forward to playing the rest of them. So
I would at least pick up 5 soon because it's the more expensive PS2 one, and I think it's climbing upwards still.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have all of them. I have all of them already, so they're all queued up. They're just in my backlog right now. But it's the age-old question of, do I continue a series that I've already played or start a new one that I already have a pile of? But anyway, that's a digression for maybe a different podcast on RF Generation. But anyway, I was wondering, just to completely change gears on one thing real quick I wanted to mention, is that, and this is kind of random, but I think the cover art for this game, and it's surprising, even after the Abomination, that was the North American cover art of the first game, when they had such a beautiful option to use that they use in the Japanese game, and they just put this awful crap on the North American cover.
But then they use the Japanese artwork on the freaking manual. Exactly.
It's like, I don't get it. But for the second game, they got it right, and oh man, did they get it right! I mean, this is just such a beautiful cover.
Oh yeah, and I love looking at my Prima guide for Suikoden 2 because it's the cover art blown up.
Yeah, that must be nice. I was thinking, and they have to exist, that a nice like framed poster, or at least like a framed print, not necessarily even poster sized, but like
you can get Suikoden posters, but I've looked into them. They're not cheap, and they're all from Japan.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this probably ranks, and if you haven't seen it, please look it up. The cover art for Suikoden 2. It's just breathtaking. It's amazing. It might be my favorite cover of all time. I'm not sure. I'd have to look around, but
everything just kind of falls into the 3 characters, and then you look at the background, and the characters are detailed, but they're kind of in like a grayscale, and then the 3 main characters are in full color.
Right.
So it kind of shows off the importance of, like, these are the most important, and everyone behind them plays a role. It gets you interested because you're not used to seeing an RPG that has a crap ton of characters on the cover. Most people, when Suikoden 1 even came out, were used to an RPG having, like, maybe 8 people as characters. 8 or 9 at most.
Right, and one of the reasons I bring this up, and it's not just to say, "Ooh, look at the pretty artwork," but as a collector, it's something that, like the cover of Earthbound looks really weird, and like the cover of, like, I know Ico isn't as collectible as it used to be. The value dropped, but I mean that horrible cover art for Ico.
The Japanese one is so good too.
Exactly, exactly. But there's so many examples of, rare and valuable games that have like either blah or just really ridiculously bad cover art. So
Mega Man.
Right, exactly. Mega Man 1, probably the all-time worst. But I mean, I know it sounds silly to talk about cover art, but this is a collector's community, and I think this is something that, from every aspect of looking at this game, you can be proud to have it in your collection, and I'm sure you would agree on that.
I'm proud to have this game in my collection. Until recently, it was also the priciest game in my collection, but then I got into Saturn.
Right, and you got a Panzer Dragoon Saga? Is that?
Yeah,
what I'm thinking about?
yeah, that's my number one now, and my working designs one. I think all are just about. I think only Dragon Force is that high anymore still.
Yeah, I saw, and now we're really digressing, but I saw that day you posted all that stuff you got from Tin Star, and I was very jealous because all those games are pretty beautiful, and most of them are pretty good to play too. So,
yeah.
But anyway,
for a shameless plug, I've reviewed most of those working designs games on my blog, so check it out on rfgeneration.com.
Absolutely.
But before we get going way too off track, I wanted to mention probably the absolute climax of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're good, I mean, why don't we wrap up with that? If you want to, we'll talk about the end of the game, and that'll be that. If you're good with it.
Yeah, basically, with the way that everyone's been describing Luca Blight and everything that you've heard about him, even if you've never played the game, he has to die. He has to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much where I said the halfway point of the game is. It may not be exactly in the middle of the game, but it marks such a huge shift in tone and tension that it's definitely the most important shift in the entire game. And the way you do it is, if there's any other character death in RPG history that comes close to Luca Blight's, it's Galif's from Final Fantasy V. But Luca Blight, the way you take him down is basically both sides work together. As weird as that sounds. The Highlanders want him dead because they think they're leading the country into ruin, and most of Luca's generals end up pledging their support secretly to Joey. So there's a big shift. Joey ends up doing some political maneuvers to where he ends up marrying Luca's sister, Gilia. So he's kind of lining himself up behind the scenes, and then everyone, the other generals saw that Luca just shamelessly, without a second thought, just executed one of his right-hand man because he lost one battle. So they fear for themselves and they fear for the country because they love their country. And that's really where the villains of this series stand out, is that their motives are actually sensible. They're not really out, unless you're Luca Blight, you're not really out to just destroy everything, just to destroy it. And even Luca has reasons behind doing what he wants to do to the city-state. But basically the way you kill him is you have to build up 3 full parties of 6 characters. So make sure you're switching people out while you run through the game.
Right.
And then you fight 3 different battles with him. And then between the battles, he's taking arrows to the legs, the knees. Make a joke there if you want. Taking them to the chest, taking them to the arms. And even the Suikoden encyclopedia that was released in Japan, the actual creator of the series said Luca Blight is the most powerful mortal in this world, in the history of this world. The only ones that are more powerful are the true rune wielders, and that's because they're immortal and have ridiculous powers. But Luca is number 1 when it comes to mortal men. And it definitely feels that way, because you have 18 people fighting him, on top of a bunch of archers shooting him from range. And then it all gets topped off with the one-on-one duel between him and Ryo.
Right. And again, just to throw out, the sprite work and the animations here are top-notch. Like, you won't see anything better, in my opinion, than in these scenes, what's going on.
It's beautifully well done, and that really shows the power of the direction of this game and how Yoshitaka Murayama, the creator of this series, is an underrated genius when it comes to storytelling, narrative, and game design.
Yeah, I completely agree, at least for these first 2 games. Now, does he stay on for the whole series, the same director?
No, he steps down from Konami when they were about 80% done with Suikoden III.
Okay.
So he had nothing to do with 4 and 5 in tactics.
Okay.
And the newer ones.
Very interesting. Do you have any interest? Well, first of all, are you done? Are you good wrapping up the story? I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you have anything else to say, I'm sorry.
Pretty much the story after that, the focus is entirely on the similar storytelling mechanic that I mentioned earlier, with how Genkaku and Han are best friends, but they're fighting on opposite sides of a war for different ideals. That's the way the game shifts after Luca's death.
Right.
It becomes much more focused on the destiny of Ryu and Joey standing on opposite sides of a battlefield, on opposite sides of a war, doing what they do. And the game does that. The game actually does a pretty good job leading into the setting for Suikoden 3, because later in the game, there's the grassland tribe chief, Lucia, joins the war on the side of Highland, and she's actually the main character's mother from Suikoden 3, because between 1 and 2 there's a 3-year time skip. Between 2 and 3 there's 15 years. So Lucia, between Suikoden 2 and 3, she goes from hot-headed youth out for the revenge of her father's assassination to certified MILF.
All right. So why don't you take us out with a recommendation of Suikoden 3? I've played Suikoden 1 and 2. Let's say I really like 2D sprite work. Convince me to play Suikoden 3, the series' first transition into 3D.
Oh, didn't you know that 3D is always better than 2D? Or at least that's what the PlayStation told me.
Exactly. Well, the times have changed, haven't they? But anyway, at the time when 3D was king, Suikoden 3 on the PlayStation 2, like I said, I want to play it. Can you just briefly tell me why I should go for it?
It's actually kind of hard, because Suikoden 3 takes a few steps forward in areas, and in other areas it takes steps backwards.
Okay.
The world exploration is much different. Instead of the big open world maps, I think it was a result of the game wanted to go 3D, but they didn't really have the budget. So instead of having a big open world, you end up with like a line graph with points on it, and then you go from point to point when you want to go from place to place. So instead of running through a field, you go to the point that says field, and then you run through the field for like 3 screens, and then you go to the next town or whatever.
Okay. I've played RPGs like that. I can't name any off the top of my head. I think a few of the Tales games are like that, but okay. I can live with that. So what else?
All right, the problem with that system is that there's a lot of backtracking. So you will be praying for Vicky, and she is a godsend in this game.
Oh, so it's not actually fast travel until you get Vicky, as usual. Okay.
Until then, it's like, okay, at the beginning of the game, you run through the field, but anytime you have to get to anything on the other side of the field, you have to run through the field again.
Okay, yeah, that does sound a little tedious.
The one-on-one duel systems haven't changed. That's
okay.
As much as the people didn't really care for it in the first game, it doesn't really get changed until 5. The tactical battles are basically like the map system. It's like a line graph with a bunch of points, and you gotta defend it. But also your character's direct battle stats translate to the tactical battles. So you can't really throw level 20s in when your main character's a level 50. So the game kind of becomes more of a time sink by having to level everyone up, and you have to make money to properly equip them too. So that's kind of a strength and a weakness with the tactical battle system of 3.
No, I mean, it sounds different, but me, being the PlayStation 2 fanatic that I am, again, I know I'm going to play this game eventually. It is likely not going to be a community playthrough, just so you all know. But yeah, I'm going to end up playing it one of these days. So I'm looking forward to it. So, Sir Psycho, unless there's anything else you'd like to throw in about Suikoden 2 or Suikoden in general, I know that it's your favorite, and I know you probably could talk for hours on it. But like I said, I don't want to just rehash the whole first show. I just give a extremely strong recommendation to this game. And in a perfect world, we would have had a lot of people playing through this game. Did a couple things wrong with the playthrough, but it's go play it on your own. I encourage everybody to do that. So, for you, Psycho, anything else?
This is really a game that should be on PSN. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there were and we talked about this on the first show. It got an ESRB rating, but then they dropped that. What did they do? They applied for one and then they removed it or something like that. So there was hope, and now it doesn't look so hopeful. Yeah. But yeah, that should absolutely, because it's so hard to find and everything else. Then I'm with you. It should be on PSN.
The thing is, really early on in PSN, they threw up the first game, and then they just kind of abandoned it. And I think one of the problems is the community itself. I got to thinking about this the other day, and I remember when Suikoden II came out on PSN, and you go onto like all kinds of video game forums or message boards or like people's walls or whatever you were looking at, and if they were asking about PSN games, then they were like, "How's Suikoden?" Everyone would say, "Oh, Suikoden 1's a good game, but 2 is way better." So you'd have the community going in and basically saying, "Hey, yeah, it's a pretty good game, but this other one is so much better," that now you have the buyer thinking, "Why don't I just wait for the second one to come out?"
Okay.
So instead of spending like $6 on Suikoden 1, they're like, "Why don't I just wait for the second one if everyone says it's way better?" So
that's definitely an interesting theory. I never looked at it that way, but you could be right for all I know. That's a very interesting take on it.
Yeah, that was a common reply that I saw on those types of messages when it first came out. Nowadays, people don't really mention the second one as much because I wonder if they've realized that. They're like, "Man, we kind of sabotaged the sales of the first game, so let's not ever mention the second game until after they play the first game."
Right. Well, who knows? Things, we never thought we would get Earthbound. I know, but they put that on the Virtual Console for Wii U eventually. So who knows? Anything can happen, right?
I know Konami has a Twitch channel where they do streaming, and I think it was like a week or two ago that they streamed some Suikoden 2. So it got like some of the fan forums going crazy. But it was too. I saw the message too late, or else I would have jumped in and said PSN, 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 PSN. I would have just copied and pasted it over and over and over again. Because otherwise, your only other options of playing this game involves dropping well over $100 online, getting extremely lucky by finding it in the wild, or going down a route that's less than legal.
Right. Yep. So we'll hope to see it on PSN eventually. Meanwhile, I would say it's worth the asking price right now. If you're into RPGs, if you really like the first game, and you're the kind of person who can save up and drop $120 to upwards of $150 on a game, I'm gonna say go for it on this one. Definitely would recommend it, even at the price. So with that, I think we should wrap up the show. I am Gregos81, and with me, Sir Psycho. Thank you so much for joining the show again and lending your expertise of the Suikoden series to the podcast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. And I've also played a lot of other RPGs, so if you need some questions or have anything like that, shoot me a question, PM. It goes to listeners or anybody on the playthrough staff, whatever.
Cool, man. We appreciate it, and we'll see you, and we'll see everybody else on the forums at rfgeneration.com. Thanks. Before
we begin this month's discussion on Ico, I would just like to send out a quick apology for the quality of my microphone this month. I was having a little bit of trouble with the mic and some of the settings and didn't realize it until after we had finished the recording. So really sorry about that. Hope you can bear with my somewhat robotic voice this month, and hope you still enjoy the show. So for the month of September on the modern side, we played a PlayStation 2 classic known as Ico. This was sort of a revisit to our June modern playthrough in which we did Shadow of the Colossus, kind of an homage to the same developers. We had such a fantastic turnaround for that game that we just decided to play the prequel. And Jamie was our host for the month, so I'll let him talk about the game.
Yeah, so this was a 2001 title on PS2, and also on the PS3 Ico and Shadow of the Colossus collection, which was released in 2011. And this was brought to us by the same people who did Shadow of the Colossus. It's sort of a boy meets girl story that has a bit of a twist. The boy is banished to this castle, and you're supposed to try and find a way out of the castle. Now, before we get into the discussion of the game, I'd just like to mention all the people who participated this month. We've got Bomba Tamba, Crabmaster 2000, Engineer Mike, Fleach, Grey Ghost 81, Silent Scythe, Singlebanana, and Techwizard, myself. And so if you guys want to get started on the gameplay, what do you think about the controls in the game? I think that's a good place to start. I felt myself that they were a bit clunky, but I'd like to see what you guys thought about them.
I think they definitely felt like an early PS2 game, sort of almost like PS1-ish controls. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say they were bad, but I mean, because I do a lot of modern gaming, so that's what I kind of have to compare that to. And it wasn't as good as what we now have in terms of game control, but it was definitely still very playable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And this game actually started out as a PS1 game, so there might be some remnants of little awkward controls going on. But I actually didn't feel like the controls were an issue. Jamie, I'm sorry to hear that you had some troubles with that. But of all the things that I didn't exactly love about this game, I wasn't feeling the controls as being a problem.
Yeah, they weren't a huge problem for me, but I just felt like they were less than perfect, basically. Just a few times where I felt like they were making things more difficult than they could have been otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie a little on this. I mean, I felt that, compared to like Shadow of the Colossus, I felt the controls were a little tougher. It was a little tougher to move the camera around, and I guess that's what I'm, just really used to in a PS2 game, is to be able to, kind of use my sticks to move the camera around a bit. And for this game, it seemed like the natural motion was to just let the camera do what it needed to do, and so it took me a little while to sort of get used to that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I found I'm kind of like half agreeing with you guys. Overall, I didn't have any trouble with the controls or the camera for that matter, but there would be moments in terms of just like level layout where I wouldn't realize that I was running into a corner, and it would just sort of take away all my momentum from my running.
Yeah.
But then I just had to tell myself, I'm playing an early PS2 game that, we all later discovered was, development started in the PS1 era. So you kind of, if you think about that, you can overlook that little minor drawback.
Right, and the trade-off is that there's a lot of subtlety in the default camera that you'll get a lot of like really picturesque landscapes, like as you're doing something, or you'll get hints where the camera is looking at something that you should be looking at, and it kind of directs your eyes to a window that you could jump through or something. So there is a little bit of a wonkiness to the manual camera, but the default camera is really well done. So I think that's kind of a trade-off that you have to make.
Well, let me ask this question real quick before we go any further. Did all of you guys play this on PS3 or PS2?
PS2 for me.
Okay.
I played it on PS3.
Yes, I played the PS3 port as well.
It should be interesting because there's some differences that we'll get into.
Yeah, that's interesting that Jamie and I had the same issue, and then you guys didn't. Do you think maybe there might have brushed that up, or maybe made some changes in that might have made it a little stronger for the PS3? I mean,
it's a
I
possibility.
imagine that could have happened. Yeah, I haven't looked into it, but maybe it's something we could look into.
I don't know if this was a PS3 edition that they made, but I believe it was pressing R2 would zoom in the camera. Do you guys have that too?
Yeah, I use that sometimes, but so rarely.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to add about the camera zoom in. Was that because I played it on the PS3 and my R2 trigger's really sensitive, so I would get like unintentional zoom ins, but it also kind of worked. It kind of gave me this like omniscient perspective, kind of gave that vibe that Ico's always being watched, and even though it was just a flaw with my controller, it kind of actually was kind of neat.
For myself, it wasn't so much the default camera versus the jumpiness of the manual camera, which I mean that was part of it, but it was a lot of times I just felt like it was kind of limiting. I would try to do a puzzle and it's like there's an obstacle in the way, just like most PS1 and 64 era 3D games where there's foreground objects that keep getting in your way. You're trying to look around them, but the camera's not really cooperating that well.
Yeah, I ran into that too. And my biggest issue was, when I would try to kind of traverse jumps, like do that sort of backwards jump, especially the part with the windmill. That was one place that took me quite a few attempts for me to to be able to make that jump and to get that camera angle right, because you're trying to sort of like traverse up the blades at the same time, as they're coming around.
Yeah, you need to line yourself up for that jump.
Right,
I found the distance to jump was really difficult to judge, like maybe something to do with the depth of field, but I found it just one of those spots where it's a little difficult to figure out how far or when to jump.
Just to jump in here, guys, the PS3 remaster, they didn't make any improvements to the actual camera and controls or anything like that. Really, all they did was that they put the HD. They did the HD remaster and they basically shored up the frame rate, and that's it. They added 3D support if you have a 3D TV, but I don't think any of us experienced that. But we should have all had the same experience with the controls. So,
but I know at least 2 rooms for sure were definitely changed, but that was more about the puzzle mechanics, not so much the controls. Because my friend played through on the PS3 version, and there's one room near the waterfall puzzle where he was trying to ask for help, and he's like, well, there's this piston thing that you have to move to get out of the room and you can't figure it out. And I'm like, what piston? And I sent him a screenshot of mine, and there's just no piston there, and like the whole layout of the room is different.
Yeah, it's sort of like a pop-up. Don't you have to like jump to a certain point or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, there was
that. In the original, that just doesn't even exist. And then I think someone mentioned above the water wheel, there's a water wheel.
There's a water wheel. Yeah, that's not in the PS2 version.
No,
that was added to the
those
PS3.
2 things were changed.
Well, I want to add that the PS3 version apparently is the European release of the game.
Okay.
So this water wheel level, I guess it's technically original content, but it didn't make it into the North American release. And
that's really interesting.
Yeah, North Americans just can't handle water wheels.
Just like we can't handle Super Mario Bros. 2.
Exactly.
I wanted to make one last note on the cameras that I felt it was so cinematic. Like they really must have had some film industry people in the development process on this game, because everything, like every shot in this game was like a painting, pretty much.
Especially when you're like traversing those towers as well, like running along the towers, getting that those landscape backdrops when you were outside. I mean, that was, some of the shots are just breathtaking. Just such a beautiful game.
Yeah, just take some screenshots and frame those.
And I'll reiterate, I mean, again, similar to Shadow Colossus, I mean, this has propelled me to get a PS3. I mean, I already have the game. It's the only PS3 game I own right now. And I had to have it. I just had to have it in my collection, even though I do not have that console yet. And I'm itching to play through these 2 games again. As soon as I get that console. So it says a lot.
Yeah, it really does. And I don't know if you guys had much experience with this on the PS3 version, but on the PS2 one, I felt like the kind of washed out colors and the slight blurriness of everything, even though it's an old graphic, it just added to the whole effect that Floyd mentioned about the painting look and style. And I feel like that actually added to it more than took away from it.
But yeah, I can imagine it looking really like misty and hazy would kind of make it look more
exactly.
like magical and ethereal. But having not played that version, I really liked the crisp, clean, vibrant visuals of the PS3 HD port.
Yeah, I've got a copy of that myself, so I'll have to try it someday.
All right, so we'll just kind of move on here and talking about kind of personal controls, and one of those options was, of course, your character, and you've got Yorda as well, and during the game you're sort of having to coax her along and drag her around with you, which is a very interesting mechanic to the game.
Escort mission, the game.
Absolutely. And one of the things I really like about this game a lot is that there are certain things that you can do, and there are certain things that only she can do. So I feel like that adds really awesome piece to the sort of the puzzle mechanics of the game, because she can't crawl down chains, she can't swing and do everything that you can do. So you have to almost think about it separately, right? You have to know what your limits are and know what her limits are as well, and put those together like cohesively to sort of solve a puzzle.
Yeah, definitely. You have to play off both of their strengths and weaknesses.
I like when you call her to do something she can't do, and she goes,
Really? I never heard that, or maybe I just didn't pay attention to that. But yeah, no, that's something I'm sure we're going to touch on, but just those little subtleties in that game.
Yeah, but the first time I realized she couldn't climb a chain, it was like, oh, it's going to be that kind of game. But yeah. But then I realized, like, that's not the way I'm supposed to go. I'm not supposed to go up here and climb this chain. I was going in completely the wrong direction, and I discovered that by realizing that she can't climb chains. So.
Did you guys notice what I mentioned in the thread about sometimes she seems to give you hints by walking towards things that you're not looking at?
Yeah, I used that a couple times, actually. If you just wait around, if the shadows don't come and try to pick her up, she'll exactly. Walk over, wander over, call you over. That was pretty cool, and a good thing to know.
Well, that's the kind of nutty thing about this game, is that there are moments when you have to leave her by herself, and you are kind of freaking out. You're like, oh, well, if you go too far or step into a certain room and get too far away from her, then these shadows are definitely going to come up and attack, and you're too far away to make it back to her, and of course, you get your end game.
And you're always worried because you can't tell exactly when they're going to show up. I mean, I've had sometimes where they show up as soon as you leave the room, and then other times you can go like 3 or 4 rooms away and they just don't show up. So it's always a bit of an element of surprise.
Yeah, you definitely have to think about your backtracking as you're kind of moving about and determining how you can get to her, to respond and be quick enough before they drag her under. So I guess that's sort of another thing we can talk about is, sort of the enemies and, how it is that you kind of save her and kind of pull her out.
Yeah, and combat in general.
Yeah, we should, I guess the larger question is what kind of place the combat had in this game, because a lot of people have problems with it. I kind of didn't love it, but, points have been made by certain people that, it helps your connection to Yorda by being able to protect her in that way. But I don't know. I felt that every time I was getting into a good groove with puzzles and, not like kind of thinking, oh, when I get over there, I can pull this lever or whatever. And then that ominous music starts, which is like the only music in the game. And it's really, it's like layers of annoyance just piling on top of each other. Like I like the game better without music. I don't like swinging my little 2x4 at these hordes of enemies. But I'm sure we can touch on like some of the mechanics. Like you can't actually die. They're only going to knock you over. The main point is to get Yorda out of there if you can.
Yeah.
I found that the combat was good like once or twice, and then it just became tedious. Like, and it was way too much the same thing over and over again. And
Right.
I think if they had changed it up a little bit more, then it might have been better.
Did you guys get to the point when you realize that Yorda opening the gates will kill everything?
Yeah.
Did you just avoid combat pretty much? Like anytime they came out, I said, "Okay, where's the door?" and just started running her towards where I thought it would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to avoid combat at all costs.
Yeah, if I could do that, I would. But in the events that I would have to either leave Yorda to move a block in place so that I could make a jump, and then I would fend off all the enemies, just clear that room before moving on. And even though combat was totally avoidable, I found it easy to dispense with all the enemies before moving on.
Yeah, I felt the same way through most of the rooms. There was a couple, or at least one room for sure, that you had to just run to the door, this big open courtyard room. But otherwise, for the most part, you could always kill off the enemies and eventually move on that way.
Yeah, I think the major complaint is that the combat was tedious because it was really drawn out. Like, you'd have wave after wave of enemies, and that...
take like 5 or 6 hits for each one of them.
Yeah, and you'd have 4 or 5 at a time, so do the math.
Yeah. It got better once you improved your weapon.
Yeah, once you picked up the sword.
Once you got to that point, it got a lot better. And if anyone found the secret, the club, which we'll probably talk about later, that weapon was really awesome. I think it was like a kind of a 2-hit weapon as well. So it made the combat a lot smoother, made it a lot easier. But I kind of agree. The combat felt a bit unnecessary in this game. It wasn't over. I never felt that it was overbearing in the game. It wasn't like you were doing it every room or in every puzzle sequence. But at the same time, I felt that like all the combat seemed to be very generic and seemed to be the same. There wasn't a plethora of enemies. There weren't any. I think this game could have done well to have maybe a few like sub-boss battles or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I never found it tedious or annoying. Just kind of something that that I had to do, to complete the game.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, kind of just time-consuming and something that ultimately I'm sure none of us minded doing, but probably would have rather have not had to have gone through.
Yeah.
But no, I just wanted to say about the combat, it really punctuated the quiet puzzle moments. And it kind of, it brought a good balance to, the peaceful downtime that would, which is the majority of the game. And it gave you the sense that, yes, you're escaping, but it's not going to be an easy, an easy path. And not only because the environment is literally trying to prevent you from not escaping, but, we have these shadow monsters.
I feel like the game was trying to imply just how weak you and Yorda were compared to everything that you're trying to fight off. And I think that it would have benefited from avoiding combat entirely and just have the enemies so overpowered that you were forced to run away every time and turn the battles into a puzzle of their own, maybe, like where you have to find a way to escape the room before you get killed.
Like that could be like a New Game Plus type difficulty setting, if you want my opinion. But I really did think it added some weight to the whole objective of getting out of this fortress with Yorda.
Yeah, I think I do agree, but I think that they could have just done a little less of it, maybe done something along the lines of what I suggested for most of the fights, and then have these sort of boss fights, like Rich was saying, where you're forced to fight these things and you have to find some way to defeat them.
Yeah, the action was more to, and the combat was more to propagate the story than it was to necessarily have battles like within the game. Yeah, it's just like, okay, here's a reminder: bad things are coming after you.
Yeah,
right?
it wasn't. It wasn't, used in the same way that a typical action adventure game would use battles, which just to sort of, give you that, feeling of, power and success and all that. I think it was used to just evoke an emotion that you're not meant to leave here. You're really, defying the expectations of your captors.
So let's talk about the game a little bit as far as we mentioned, this is sort of an action-adventure game, of course. There's some combat in it. But it's also, for the most part, is a puzzle game. Puzzle mechanics, are throughout this game. Every room is a puzzle game. If you're the kind of person that really dislikes puzzle games, I'm looking your way, Shawn, then you may not like this game and may become frustrated with it. I do know that Shawn sort of changed his tune about this game, but if you're a member and you have read the forums, you know that there were there was a few rage quits and such as Shawn was playing the game. So I'll let him kind of attack this a little bit.
All right, sure. And it's kind of funny. It's this game has so many parallels to the Wind Waker playthrough from my perspective because of the environmental puzzles. And just the same way, when we were playing the Wind Waker, I was posting in the forums every day how much the game was giving me fits. But at the end of the day, I was really glad that I played it. You know what I mean? And I feel the same way with Ico. And I must say that I consider myself like a PS2 fanatic. That's by far my favorite console. It's my favorite part of my collection. It's the biggest part of my collection. And I've played Shadow of the Colossus. The reason I've never played Ico is because I've heard that it's frustrating, and that kept me from playing it for all these years. So I'm really grateful that we had the playthrough of this game, because it just made me say, well, the hell with it, I'll give it a try. So having said that, it's not nearly as frustrating as I had it built up in my mind, both from the combat perspective and also from the puzzle perspective.
I think it helps that it's a pretty short game too. It's not more than maybe 5 hours at most.
Agreed.
Yeah, you can totally plow through it in one sitting if you really wanted to.
Right.
Absolutely. I think I called it this is the perfect rainy Saturday game.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just sit through it and play it. It's great.
So having said all that, I am not. It's not like puzzle games that I don't like. It's environmental puzzles and the more abstract puzzles, because I don't usually make the connection in my brain in a game where I can't hold a 2x4 in one hand and the sword in the other hand to then know that I have to, whatever you got to do, throw a bomb here, or, climb this rope or swing on it or whatever. Like games where you're supposed to use real world logic and only some of the time, when the game wants you to, kind of thing. That's where I'm like my skills kind of break down. So I relied on a guide a lot, a walkthrough, but still I had streaks, especially towards the end of the game, from the front gate towards the end of the game. I didn't touch a walkthrough, which isn't saying much because that's the easiest part of the game. But I don't know, and the parts where I rage quit, it wasn't because I couldn't figure out a puzzle. It was because I was miscalculating a jump over and over, and it was really far away from a save point, and I was really getting upset about that.
That's kind of the issues I had with the camera sometimes, not lining up, and then I'd misjudge the distance and fall off a cliff or something. Right,
and for the most part, the save points are pretty well spaced apart, but I think they're far enough apart that it at times discourages you from experimenting and making any kind of leaps of faith. If you're not sure you can make a jump, you will be reluctant to do it, because if you die, you'll go back, 10 minutes or whatever it is that you'll have to do a bunch of stuff again. So I feel that was a big detriment to the game. But like I said, as frustrating as I thought it was going to be, it really wasn't. And I'm glad I played it with you guys. So
Yeah, I think the save point thing is a trade-off because on your first playthrough, the save point's going to be as much as half an hour apart at least. But then once you've done the puzzles once and you go through again, it can be as much as maybe 5 minutes apart for the same save points.
right. And the funny thing is, you don't think about it a lot, but there are checkpoints. Sometimes you'll die and you'll go back to the love seat, but sometimes you'll die and there's a checkpoint. So
true,
even the save points, if they're spaced far apart, you might get lucky and you'll have a checkpoint in there if you fall off a cliff or something.
Well, you will respawn at the last idle door you opened or the last save point you used, whichever is closer.
Okay, so that must be it then. I didn't realize that it was the doors that did it, but I knew there was some kind of checkpoint.
Major story points, like after some of the cutscenes, I think some of them were considered itself as a checkpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for the most part, doors and save points were the major things. So on some of the specific rooms, I had a couple favorites here, and some not so favorite rooms. I think one of my favorite rooms was the one with the broken center walkway and like the chandelier that you have to make fall down, blowing up the pillar and all that. It was frustrating at first, but I just really liked the room, the mechanics of it, and figuring out all the different multiple puzzles. And
that was the first room where you had to use fire, actually, because you had to use the 2x4 on the chandelier.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
I couldn't figure that one out. I had to get that from a guide. I didn't.
Yeah,
know
not on the chandelier, but on the bombs. You needed it.
Yeah,
Right.
that one of the more frustrating things in the game, just as a side note for me, was lighting the 2x4s, and like if there was a torch on the wall or something you're supposed to light, sometimes I couldn't get it to sort of like interact and light it like each time. I get a little frustrated with that. I thought that could have been done a little bit better. It seemed like you had to be like standing in a certain spot. But I did like that room as well. I thought that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. I think that's related to the bad pathing that the game had sometimes with, Yorda sometimes would need to be in a very, very specific spot before she would actually jump up to catch your hand. And like you said, sometimes you have to be in a very specific little X to light a torch or whatever. And it just seems to be very picky with things like that.
Yeah.
Even saving, like near the benches sometimes.
Yeah,
it was,
that too.
Just getting her to like interact and to just sit down, just sit down so I can save this game.
Yeah. Yeah, like when you sit down, she's kind of on your right side and trying to move to your left, and it's like she hits your knees and kind of does a little circle around your legs and then walks to the other side and misses the couch and comes back. And
yeah.
I mean, I never encountered anything like that, but I thought it was really quaint and quite adorable that you can, run Ico over to, the save sofa, and you had to call Yorda over to, and you both had to sort of sit down together to save. It made Yorda seem more human and just like less of a video game avatar, and it helped me sort of stop thinking that I'm playing a game and that I'm really experiencing something.
I agree for the most part. It's just there's the odd time where she seemed to be kind of walking in circles back and forth in the same spot and trying to find your hand to jump up to a ledge, and it's right in front of her, but she keeps walking past it.
I had some real... I thought that as good as Yorda's AI was, there were some real, immersion breaking situations with her, like that long ladder after the second tower that you open the door with.
Mm-hmm.
I climbed up it and climbed back down, and for no reason she started climbing up it.
Oh, no.
and went all the way up, and I was like, what
Really?
the hell are you doing going up there? So I'm just sitting there and I had to wait for her to climb all the way up, and I'm like, get the hell back down here.
I think once she starts climbing, she doesn't stop.
Yeah.
I think that's what people generally complain about, is that Yorda's really slow, especially on the ladders.
Her little one-handed step up, she doesn't kind of go back and forth hand to hand. She goes one hand up and then the next one, and then
exactly,
going up sideways almost.
But I mean, I there were times where I thought okay, this is now I just have to wait for you to climb up this ladder, or you have to climb down this ladder, and it's going to take forever. But I didn't really mind.
No, it makes it sort of more endearing too. It makes you feel like you're sort of the protector. It makes her, I guess, feel or seem a little more feeble than your character and less adventurous. And so,
See, you got kids, so you can kind of identify with it. I'm serious, right? Don't you think that you could probably identify with Ico a little bit better in that perspective? Like for me, I'm like, come on, you stupid idiot. Take my hand. Let's go. Like,
yeah, I think you're
what
probably
do you
hitting
mean
on
you
something
can't
there.
climb a chain?
Maybe it's just a reflection of us as people. I don't know.
I think you're right. I mean, I think I do like have probably a little more patience than what I used to have, and so maybe that's kind of reflecting in my gaming. So I mean, that's a good point.
I just wanted to say that, I'm single and kids are, in the, future for me. But having Yor to do the, 1 foot, 1 hand ladder climb, it just made me think that, like, okay, she's not like a nimble young person. Like, she's just been trapped up in this fortress for the majority of her life, compared to Ico, who's, in terms of relatively has had a a life of luxury where he can go run and jump and play and do all this kind of like kid boy stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the most important thing you said right there was just to note it, Floyd's single. So all of you ladies out there listening to this podcast, all 2 of you.
Yeah, he won't mind if you take a really long time climbing the ladder.
Yeah, I'm
help you
fine with slow ladder
True
climbing.
gentleman. Slow ladder
I will
climbing.
catch you when you try to jump across a ledge.
He'll pull you out of bottomless pits.
Yeah. And I have plenty of 2x4s to swat at shadows. And if you're interested, please PM me.
There you go. At rfgeneration.com.
That's right.
/ OkCupid.
No, I don't have any of those, but I am on Facebook, and my Twitter is at Fleach.
All right.
So, anyway, favorite rooms. Did you guys have any rooms or specific areas that you thought were really great?
Yeah, I'll jump in here if I may. I thought the second tower was great because it's not an exact flip, like an exact mirror flip of the first tower, but a lot of the same elements are there.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? By tower, you mean the rooms where you'd have to use those reflector things to focus a light, right?
Yes, I'm sorry if I'm not being clear here. The 2 rooms that open each side of the main gate.
Oh, okay.
The ones you access by walking along the outer walls.
In the first room, you get the sword, and in the second one,
you get nothing.
You get nothing. But again, so that room was kind of my favorite because that's where I felt confident for the first time in the game, because I thought, oh, I did this before. And I actually did. I think there are 2 ways that you can do it, because you can climb up the water room and then turn the water off. But I actually somehow circumvented that and turned the water off first. So I was actually kind of like patting myself on the back, like I felt like I had figured something out. So I felt like the game kind of built up confidence for you by the time you got there. And plus realizing like, okay, I'm going to open the other side of this gate. I can see a light at the end of the tunnel that is this game. Like, we're going to go and get through that main gate. It's going to be so cool, So I really that was my favorite segment of the game.
Yeah, mine would probably be the I really liked the windmill. I mean, I just thought that was beautiful, and just a great, just really integration of that device in a game. I mean, it's beautiful. It was iconic, and from I think it was the alternate cover that's inside of the PS3 version. They sort of note that windmill. That's kind of a big backdrop on the game, and I just really like that room. That was drawn by
Fumito Ueda himself, the director of the game. He drew that original cover.
I mean, we all agree that the North American art was pretty lousy.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'd have to go with Fleach here. It's definitely not as good as the European or Japanese one.
Yeah, the European/Japanese artwork really captured everything this game is about. It's two people trying to escape, against the odds, and gives you that sense of size. And it was inspired by a Spanish surrealist painter named Giorgio de Chirico. And he does the same sort of like archways and like angular shadows and light off in the distance. I think Ico really drew me in through its artwork that we never got to see in North America. I mean, I loved it so much that thanks to a link that Rich sent to me, I bought the poster, and it's now hanging up in my game room. I think it's not only is it like beautiful as a piece of art, it's beautiful as a reflection of what this game is about.
And I think there was a lot of good T-shirts in that link too, wasn't there?
Yeah. Check out that
really
thread
cool.
if you haven't. There's some just great stuff. Yeah, definitely going to be getting some of those shirts for Christmas. And something that Floyd mentioned to me too that I wanted to point out: if you do own the PS3 version, make sure that you take your insert out and flip it around, and you can actually have that artwork. They did it sort of a reversible cover, and you can actually have that really
cover?
nice artwork.
Rich, did you?
Yeah.
And you have the reversible cover.
Yes, I do, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's got Shadow of the Colossus on one side and Ico on the other side. It's really nice.
Yeah, the Japanese artwork for both games is just phenomenal. On my
looks better on your shelf.
Yeah, on my compilation disc, I have the generic cover, and then just the backside is white.
Oh,
maybe that's the Canadian exclusive kind of thing, because sometimes we get different prints.
Yes, we do.
Unfortunately.
Wow.
Yeah, my favorite rooms, because I had two, were, I guess I could sort of put these two as one, were the two reflector rooms. So I enjoyed the puzzle that they presented, and it was really, I don't know how to put it, it was really like connected. You could go down this one path within the room, and that would take you to that waterfall type area, or you go down that other path, which would eventually lead you outside, where you had to move the light reflector to channel the light energy. And then just for the pure visual aesthetic beauty of it, I really liked the outdoor segment with the windmill.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was one of the beautiful things about this game. I feel like when you opened the first door, or you activated the first side of the door, you knew automatically, okay, I'm going to have to activate that other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you knew that it was going to be in a similar fashion, and just, how symmetrical that portion of the game was, and you knew you were going to have to do that. To me, was really cool. I mean, someone might say, well, maybe that's a little bit redundant. I didn't feel that way at all. I mean, I felt like there were two separate puzzles. It was beautiful. You knew what you had to do, and it's one of those things that I really liked about this game was how the game really folds like sort of back on itself.
Yeah, it's a very symmetrical experience.
Yeah, and you have to like traverse areas again, but it's so well designed that you don't have to backtrack that far. I mean, you'll have to go through another room again, and maybe you've opened something up, but it's so well designed that nothing feels forced in the entire game. I mean, to me that's simply amazing that they could just put that together, in this, into a larger scale puzzle.
Yeah, I really like that too, and I think this is a bit of a testament of the PS2's processing power, was that the whole fortress is one complete thing. Like the architecture and layout of it makes sense, right? And
it's all one environment.
Yeah, it's all one big, huge environment, and there's very minimal loading screens.
Just like Shadow of the Colossus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and while we're talking about the design of this game, I just had it in my head that I wanted to mention that when we did the podcast for The Last of Us, I was complaining, and a few of us were, about just the flaws of modern game design. And I was thinking, like, well, this, The Last of Us has a great story. It's very cinematic, but then you got to run around and shoot people in the face. And it's just one of those kind of games when you boil it down. And in a way, like, Ico is the game I was asking for. You know what I mean? Like, as I was playing Ico, it's like, this is what I wanted. This is some kind of minimalist, there's no HUD on the screen. There's no tutorials. It's all, you're going by intuition. You have to figure things out for yourself. At times the game is relaxing. There's so many, like, stop and look around, and, I call them smell the roses moments when they happen in games. So it's like, I had this, like, kind of conflicted feeling, even at times when I wasn't loving the game. That's like, oh wait, yeah, this is the game that I wanted, and it's the game that I long for every time I'm playing a shooty shoot game, as we call them around these parts. So
yeah, it should be no surprise that this game is an industry darling and has inspired a lot of people to get into game design and whatnot, and has inspired and influenced the design of many current games.
I was thinking Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons a lot while I was playing Ico. Actually, Brothers has no combat in it, so if you want Ico without the combat, although the puzzles are way, way, way easier in Brothers, but I could see the influence.
I don't actually know that game. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, great little game, yeah.
And a game we've already played in the playthroughs, on the modern side on the Wii, Lost in Shadow. I mean, obviously borrowed from this game. I mean, it's obvious. There's so many parallels in the two, and I think I mentioned this on the forums. I won't go into it right now to any explicit detail, but I will say, just to kind of get back to this whole minimalist design and approach to this game, there weren't a whole lot of cutscenes to this game. The ones there were completely, just stunning, just beautiful cutscenes. But that sort of added to the minimalism of the game. It was just sort of direct puzzle, platforming, and just not a lot itself. But that was nice in a way.
I'd
really
say you could
itself.
probably count the number of cutscenes on one hand, maybe two at most.
Yeah,
Definitely less than 10.
This game definitely wants to absorb your attention, and then it really doesn't let go until the very end. And I think having cutscenes almost in sort of that, like, Naughty Dog style, where it's like, complete this room, get a cutscene, complete that room, get a cutscene, it would have really diminished the overall experience.
Yeah, I agree. So, what do you guys think about the comparisons with, like, Shadow of the Colossus with some of the game elements, like just with the camera controls and, like, the gameplay? It's all very similar to Shadow of the Colossus. Is this something you think that future games from this company will be using the same thing?
Future games? I don't think so.
Games, maybe, hopefully.
Well, first of all, it's future game, and that's wishful thinking.
Right. I was just, I'll just throw in real quick. I was just happy that, again, having played Shadow of the Colossus and having shied away from Ico, I'm really glad that playing Ico wasn't just a huge step backwards, because sometimes that happens when, obviously, this isn't a direct sequel, but it's the next game that Team Ico produced, so you're naturally inclined to think, well, Ico came before it must be a step backwards, but at least from my perspective, it wasn't. It was just as playable as Shadow of the Colossus was, from my perspective. So I was very, happily surprised about that. And the biggest similarity that carried over for both games to me was just the grand scale of the environments. And I think I said in the forum that nobody does scale, even to this day. Nobody can do scale like Team Ico did. So
they definitely work best in big.
Yeah, so that's definitely one thing that was within both games that is the best part of both games, in my opinion. As good as the gameplay can be, whatever pros and cons you have with it, that's what makes a Team Ico game in my heart and mind, is that scope, that breathtaking, like how did they get this kind of perspective on the screen? Like it's unbelievable.
I completely agree. I mean, the problem for me in playing this game, and I'm sure for a lot of people, was we had played something so awesome and fantastic as Shadow of the Colossus in June, and it was like, there's nothing that can match this. Oh, it's made by the same company. Well, I still don't think it's going to match up, and you can't separate the two after you've already played Shadow of the Colossus, and that was really hard for me. But I managed to do it and play through it and try not to think too much about Shadow of the Colossus as I was playing it. And on the face, they're two completely different games. You've got Shadow of the Colossus is a game with, it's mainly action adventure, but it has small amount of puzzle elements that you have to figure out. While Ico is, I knew I was going to do that. Ico is completely the opposite. It's heavy puzzle, light action, right? And so just the diversity between the two games, I don't even look at them as the same game. The only thing to me that is similar between both games is just the sort of the minimalist approach and the beauty of the games. And as you were saying, and I think I mentioned on the forums, Shadow of the Colossus has this very just huge and vast world that you have to traverse, whereas Ico is a more contained world. But even though it's so contained, it feels so huge and so vast as you're playing it.
Yeah, you're right. I was going to say that too. I think because I played Shadow first, I can see a lot of the things that they did in Ico that sort of were either perfected in Shadow of the Colossus or things that carried over. Most notably, it was just like the scale of things and just like the cinematic nature of everything. But definitely, Ico, they wanted to focus on the emotion and the story. And in Shadow of the Colossus, it was basically, let's make a game that's all boss battles and with, peaceful moments in between. I think when you talk about a game, you're going to always remember the boss battles. And that's probably the first thing you're going to talk about. So that's probably what inspired Team Ico to make Shadow. Whereas with Ico, they wanted to make something that's more peaceful, perhaps more reflective, and just more sentimental, really, at the end of the day.
Either that, or maybe they're realizing, oh, hey, we forgot boss battles in Ico. Let's just make a whole game with boss battles.
No, I completely agree with that assessment as far as wanting to make something a lot more reflective, in that sense. Because there weren't many ways that you could die in this game. I mean, you couldn't be taken out by enemies. The only ways were, if you fail, from a certain distance or height, or if Yorda was taken away from you. So I feel like, the main part of this game was just figuring out the puzzles, and they, just really wanted to keep the story going. It wasn't about your character dying in this game, or dying often. It was about making you try new things and push forward and fulfilling and completing this story. This narrative.
Right. Yeah. It kind of it's an interesting little experiment in the way we perceive narratives as well. Like if we look back on Ico as a story, those moments where we miss the jumps don't really exist, right? And
that's true.
The moments where Yorda was, sucked down into those black voids, you can just sort of fill in the blanks and just say, well, Ico went back to that, casket room, retrieved Yorda, and they just backtracked to where they were at the last save point. And then the story continues.
So I think this is a good spot, as we're bringing up a lot of story things, to move on to the overall story of the game. Mostly we've been talking about gameplay here in some specific areas. So at the start of the game, you've got this village of people, very similar to the villagers of Shadow of the Colossus, where whenever they find a boy who's been born with horns, which is what Ico is, and then they'll banish them to this castle. And so you're carried at the start of the game to the castle. You're locked up alive for some reason inside of this coffin, and just left there to starve to death, I suppose. And from there, that's where the story starts, basically.
I think the backstory, or perhaps post-story, is that every body that's within those caskets in that main chamber are previous horned boys that have been taken to the temple. Because as you'll see in the final battle, or sort of battle leading up to the final battle, is that you're fighting these ghost, shadowy figures of horned boys. Mm-hmm. So it seems like there's some sort of deal made with the village or the shamans and the queen that, you bring me your horned boys and they will, guard my temple, and you'll be removing a bad omen from your community.
Mm-hmm.
It's an old world feel. I mean, this game has a very old world kind of feel. As far as magic, as far as bad omens and things like that, stuff you would see in sort of like Greek tragedy.
Yeah, that's why it felt like it was like a fairy tale almost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I had a real tough time sort of placing this game, and that's what, something I probably want to talk about a little bit later. Maybe not right now, but I felt like I couldn't place the game as far as, you're on a castle, people are still riding horses and things like that, but as you're going through the castle, you see, like, piping, like, and things like that, more modern things like, like metal pipes and things like that, so it's really hard to kind
industrial feel.
Yeah, it was kind of like industrial / steampunk meets, the ages of typical fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so my perspective, it was like, was this sort of like an apocalyptic story? Was there a certain group of people that lived in this area to begin with, and then they died out, and it's going back to sort of a primitive culture, or kind of what's happened here? But it seems it's kind of it's an odd world, and mix. It feels very old world sort of mixed with new world. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make about the game.
Yeah, it's very confusing about where or when it's supposed to be taking place, and it's hard to tell if it's actually Earth or if it's some other world.
Yeah, and I think, like, even though I'm sure Ueda is open to these theories and ideas, it's not totally necessary to think about, who are these people or when is this taking place to have an appreciation for this game. This game just, it is, right?
Yeah. It's trying to tell a basic sort of love story through an extraordinary world.
Yeah, it's to try to put a date or a setting on this story would really detract from its just ability to transcend language and transcend time. I think, suppose a third world person was able to grasp that, I'm pressing a button on the controller and it's making something happen on a TV, and this TV is not going to capture my soul. But let's say you could explain what a game system is and what a TV is. They could relate and get some sort of experience out of Ico.
Well, that's what we love, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the whole fascination. It's something that's universal. Real. Yeah, it's universal. It's real on the surface, but is otherworldly in certain aspects. I mean, it's the same reason people love Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a galaxy far, far away, but at the same time,
it's got its parallels it's still, to
modern life and to still sort of the boy meets girl story. Mm-hmm. Just you just have to hope it's not your sister. Anyway, that's for another podcast, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a bit of a like the Minotaur thing. We mentioned some Greek tragedies earlier, and it does have a bit of connections with like the Minotaur in the labyrinth and
Icarus, right?
Theseus.
Yeah, I think it was Theseus and like King Minos.
Right. Yes.
And sending the children to be sacrificed to the Minotaur. It's very similar to that. And then the Horned Boy connection to Shadow of the Colossus with the ending of that, and the horns growing out of the character there. There's sort of a lot of connections to different stories here. What do you guys think of like the dream sequence sort of at the start of the story there, early on? It's showing Yorda as a shadow creature, and sort of, in my mind, it was implying that something bad was going to happen because of freeing her, but in the end, it didn't seem like that was the case. I don't know if you guys thought something about that.
I'm still a little perplexed by that portion where you get kind of pulled through the wall, and you just kind of wake up on the floor. You know, that was an odd scene to me, and it made me feel, okay, is what I'm doing right now, is that the reality of the situation, what I'm doing, or have I been pulled into a dream now? Is this what I'm doing, just enacting a dream? You know, and not knowing the story, having never played the game before, that sort of crossed my mind.
Yeah, those first impressions.
You know, I'm quite fascinated that you guys would think that was Yorda pulling Ico through the floor in that dream sequence, because I picked up that it was, just it was a vision of Ico's, but the way I perceived it was more of just providing context of what is expected of the player and what Ico has to do, and it was just sort of outlining your next objective without words.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I just want to know why you guys think that was Yorda pulling Ico through the floor.
Well, I thought to me it looked a lot like her, because when you first see her trapped in that cage at the top of that long staircase there, she is a shadow creature just like that, and at the end of the game as well.
Mm-hmm. I might have to go back and watch that again, because I just thought that was, just a shadowy figure, similar to Colossus. But no, I never made that connection in my mind that could be Yorda.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection either.
Maybe I'll have to watch it then.
Yeah,
I'm going by memory, so
I just thought it was a shadowy figure, but I wasn't, having never played the game before getting pulled through the wall, I wasn't looking for a young girl either. You know what I mean? Because that was before, meeting her, interacting with her.
Yeah, I knew that there was the girl and the boy storyline going there, so I sort of thought that it looked like a young girl in my mind, but like I said, maybe I'm mistaking it in my memory and have to give it another listen or a look.
Maybe. Because I'm sure we'll touch on that shadowy figure of Yorda that rescues Ico at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. But no, I think that whole vision sequence was just a totally visual way of outlining what this game's about, what you're going to have to do, and your very next objective is this. Like all without
like
words.
A tutorial?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. That does make sense when you explain it that way. Mm-hmm. A little farther on, because there's not really too much story happening in between, but what did you guys think about the queen that you meet when you first come to the gate, who turns out to be Yorda's mom? Like, I have in my notes here that Yorda's mom is a creepy jerk. She seemed to have little care for Yorda.
Well, I mean, we have no backstory of the relationship between the queen and Yorda, but we do learn later on that the queen does need to sacrifice Yorda in order to sustain her life and perhaps her grasp of evil within the world.
Well, I know in the cutscene when you first meet the queen there, she definitely says, what are you doing with my daughter, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, we do know that they're related, but we don't know
the history
of their relationship exactly. Yeah, thank you. It's just obviously Yorda does not want to be there, and the queen is doing anything that she possibly can to prevent Ico from taking Yorda out of the castle.
Yeah,
do you feel like that your escape in any way is causing her to have to take the life of her daughter now? Because it seems as though, okay, why now? Why, it's sort of like, why am I being put in this position right now to, have to use my daughter to do this, and
You're
it seems
almost
like
thinking like it's Ico's fault for
yeah,
what the mom
maybe.
is
I
doing.
mean, for escaping and for not passing along his essence that, obviously she's feeding off the essence of all these horned kids as well. So you're wondering if maybe, and I kind of got the feeling like that I was sort of maybe a part of the cause of this.
Well, that's kind of the theme of Shadow of the Colossus too. I mean, do you feel like maybe you're influenced by that game a little, and that those kind of themes or subconsciously playing on you? I mean, I think you're onto something for sure, and it very well could be, something that the developers have, went back to for Shadow of the Colossus. But it never dawned on me that, like, now she has to be sacrificed because we tried to take her out, like...
Yeah, no, it's never implicitly stated.
Right.
Actually, now that I think about it, I had one note here where I was thinking that the queen's weakening, her dying, and the connection with the destruction at the end of the game for the whole castle after she's dead. Maybe as she's been weakening, the castle's been deteriorating, because as you go through the game, there's ruins everywhere, and the castle's kind of crumbling. And it feels like that's been going on for a long time. And so along that line of thought, she's already been weakening for a long time. The connection with her and the castle's been weakening, and so it seems less likely that it was actually Ico's fault. Well, if this is stuff that's been going for a while.
Which could explain why the queen needs Yorda, right? No, I never got the impression that because Yorda is trying to escape, that is why she needs to be sacrificed. I mean, why else would she be kept in a cage then?
Yeah, before you even meet her.
She's obviously imprisoned there for a reason, and I think that reason for her imprisonment.
She's backup food.
Yeah. She's being imprisoned because her fate is to be sacrificed to, extend the queen's power.
Yeah, that's definitely what I was getting.
Well, I think and as we said before, I mean, I think with this game, just like Shadow of Colossus, I mean, with the Team Ico's games, there are no solidified ways to think about these games. They're completely open for interpretation. And I think that's, to me, I mean, to having the background that I do, I mean, that's what I love about them. I mean, there's so much mystery, and that you're not able to put something together that's completely solid. I mean, you're able to put something together that's coherent and that makes an actual good story, but there are always these lingering sort of questions that you have to, come to terms with on your own and make your own story out of that. And I think that's the real beauty and brilliance of these games.
Exactly. I mean, that's why it still holds up today, because it gives you enough to make sense of the story. And if you want to piece together, a theory based on the environment or the context of what you're doing, you can. But it's not necessary to do so in order to get an appreciation for the game. And that really makes it timeless. This game will probably be as good now as it will be in 10 years from now. And I'm sure in 2014 this game is as good as it was back in 2001. If you compare that to something that was made this year, last year, we will probably look back and say, this game is so 2013, and so it's got all those gimmicks and tropes and cliches of that whatever was popular at that time period.
So I think that's a good spot to kind of move on to the final boss battle and the ending credit sequence, all that. How do you guys feel about the fight with all of the different shadow boys there at the end, and Or I guess we should start at the opening of the gate.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a really to me the best moment in the game is after the gate opens.
Right.
When you're crossing
definitely.
the bridge, when the bridge starts separating and Ico's on one side and Yorda's on the other side, there's a split second where you have control of Ico, and it's amazing in that split second. You have to decide what to do, and I don't know what your options really are, but in the end, I ended up running back and jumping to have Yorda catch me.
Exactly. I think it's not even that you have a decision, is you explicitly know what to do. Because
right.
You've spent so much time with these characters and you've grown to like them, right? Like,
exactly, but then don't you have this like cognitive dissonance as a gamer, which is like, what happens if I jump in the river, if I go the other way? Like, but your heart makes you jump into Yorda's arms, which I thought was one of the most powerful moments, and actually for me, like, redeemed any frustrations I had with the game, which were on me for not liking environmental puzzles, were like washed away by that one split second of, oh my god, I gotta go back and I have to go back.
exactly.
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Like, what a beautiful moment. Well, how powerful.
Yeah.
After the whole game, you're trying to escape the castle, and you're finally free, and you realize, nope, I want to go back. And
Yep.
Yeah.
gotta save
It's
the girl.
a true depiction and really honest just like tale of not even like love between two people, but like the compassion and sympathy between two people.
Yeah. It's that moment in the game where you realize I am really a part of this game.
Yeah.
Because you're like, without even thinking about it, you're trying to jump. I mean,
Exactly.
You don't even hesitate. I mean, it's like, I got to get over there. I can't leave her behind. It's that moment in the game. And it's beautiful, like you said. It's fascinating.
I think I had talked to a friend about this before he went to play the game recently, and I mentioned what I did, and so I think intentionally he tried to get her to jump to him just to see what would happen, and he said that you could hold your arm out there, but she just doesn't do anything. She sits there and mopes.
Well, I mean,
just waits for you to come for her.
let's sort of put that, let's reconstruct that scene. Yorda has opened the last gate, or she's a conduit to open both doors or whatever, and you can see that she's not as shiny, and she kind of shuffles her feet and limps behind you, so you can't run with her. You have to walk.
Yeah, unless you want her to fall down every few seconds.
Exactly. Yeah. So like she's been weakened by definitely like opening the gates and perhaps the whole ordeal that they've been through. And so you level with her and you like carefully, gently lead her out of across the bridge, I should say. And at that moment, like, you kind of feel like, yeah, we did it. We're out of here. But then the queen appears and starts to retract the bridge, and you realize that Yorda's just as invested in you as you are in her by calling you over to her and rescuing you. And like, obviously my mind immediately went to that first scene where there's a bridge that crumbles and you help Yorda jump across. And now it's just like, you saved me, I saved you. Like, we're really in this together now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's sort of a tipping point towards the end of the game, where, like you said, it's changed from you're trying to save her, and then the second half of the game, or the second quarter, I suppose, you're being rescued by her at that point. You still have to go find her, but once you do find her, you fight the final boss, and she ends up saving you in the end, which I thought was really powerful too.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the gameplay after that? The kind of solo gameplay. It was kind of odd in a sense because here you are, you're alone again. You're not dragging someone around. It's still the same puzzle elements and things like that, but you're weaponless as well, which is sort of strange. And I guess you don't have to worry about shadows because you don't have Yorda with you. But at the same time, to me, it was a little bit odd. It was a, sort of a Lithy piece too.
And still some frustrating puzzles left too, like that sewer puzzle with all the water wheels. That was a
tricky.
real struggle. Yeah.
Yep. And I think it was meant to feel odd. You were meant to feel alone. Yeah, and you were meant to feel isolated, and having spent so much time trying to get out of the castle, now you're out and you need to get back in. So it is just as you put it, Rich. It was odd and strange, and that's exactly what they were going for. They nailed it. So.
So now back to where I thought we should jump in earlier, but I moved us around a bit. The fight with the Shadow Boys, when you see Yorda's kind of statue body laying at the top there. How do you guys feel about that? Because for me, when I was doing it, I almost thought it was an endless fight because I just couldn't tell exactly when it was going to end until you realize that the coffins are lighting up every time you kill one of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I noticed
same
that too.
thing happened to me, man. I didn't catch on to that at first. That each cell had a dude coming out of it, and I didn't know if you guys noticed, but you can actually do nothing, and like they won't hurt you, and they won't hurt Yorda. You can actually, and sometimes they're kind of hard to hit. They dodge you very well, but if you just stand there and do nothing, they won't do anything to you. It's a very strange sensation, in a game.
I didn't realize. I just assumed that they were going to start attacking me like the other ones did.
Yeah, no, it's pretty neat. And I wonder actually what we think of that as far as who they are and what you're doing to them. I guess I haven't put too much thought to it.
As far as I know, that they're just supposed to be the previous horned boys, because all of them have horns and they kind of look similar to you, sort of.
Right, but I'm saying in the context of, they won't actually hurt you. They're just kind of menacing you and just jumping around, and I wonder if in a way you're releasing them, kind of in the way that you released yourself. If you know what I'm saying, it's too late for them. But you know what I mean? You're freeing them. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know.
So, they're sort of stuck in limbo in this fortress, and you're trying to release their souls or whatever to go on.
They're still jumping around being annoying.
Maybe
running away from you. If they want that, just stand still.
Yeah.
I guess it's a possible reading that you could put into it, that by killing them with that light powered sword, you're letting them move on. But yeah, they are benevolent spirits, and even when you're trying to escape with Yorda and they pull her back into that black void, they're not hurting you, and they're not explicitly hurting Yorda. So why are you attacking them? Right? It makes you question, is this place really evil?
Right, and I think it's going back again to that theme of, am I doing the right thing here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually considered that when I was playing. I just thought that the whole place was related to the queen, and she kind of turned all these shadow creatures to evil. And to me, it was pretty straightforward. But I could see that, it might go the other way as well.
Yeah, it didn't feel as these shadow creatures were quite as benevolent as, say, the shadows that appeared during Shadow of the Colossus, if that makes sense.
Well, those shadows are totally different, right? They're what they are is totally up to speculation and up to debate, but they just stand around you. They could be the spirits that are contained within the Colossi, or they could be components of Dorman himself. Whereas in Ico, these are definitely the spirits of the horned children that have been brought here by the villagers. They're gone. They've ascended into some kind of afterlife. Thus their sort of ethereal, shadowy composition. But I found why am I really attacking these other than them vanishing by my doing so.
Well, these horn boys are, on essence, basically a food source or a power source for the queen. So, in essence, in taking them out, maybe weakening her at the same time.
That's very likely. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the official purpose of those shadows.
Yeah. Just to kind of get back to the point of that battle or series of battles, I guess, it felt a little contrived. It was, not the most exciting thing. I mean, luckily you had upgraded your weapon at the time. You could one hit them, which was nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it did feel a little tedious to me. It didn't feel necessary. I didn't, kind of reflecting on it. Yeah, I'm coming up with some things, but at the time, in the moment of the game, it felt unnecessary. It just felt like a hoop I had to jump through at the time.
It dragged on, and just because those shadowy creatures were so nimble and agile that they could dodge any move of yours, kind of just made it feel too long.
Just above the height of your swing when they're flying.
Yeah, it was an emotionless battle. I mean, I'd been battling so many shadow monsters that were, trying to grab Yorda the whole time that this battle, I did not feel any type of sympathy for these creatures. It was just like, let me just dispatch them as quick as possible.
I think, now, because we can look back at this with hindsight.
Right.
And perhaps a more impactful and more meaningful scene to replace that would be, any number of horned boys, let's say 5 of them, surrounding Yorda's body, who will push Ico back if he tries to approach her. And then the only way to get rid of them is to just hack and slash through them, which would then open up the gate to the throne room, and then you go fight the queen. It would be just as symbolic, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's what the creators were probably going for, something a little bit emotional there, but I feel like it failed.
Because it was too long-winded, right?
Right, and they were kind of jumping around, you had to chase them down. If they were just like motionless and standing there, and the only way to open that door was to hack through all of them, and they were just sort of sacrificing themselves, I think there would have been more of an emotional tie there.
Definitely,
and it would have made you kind of reflect on that moment a little bit more. But the fact that they were jumping around, and it felt like, these are just additional shadow creatures, and maybe you put together that these were the shadows of those boys. I think a lot more could have been done there to draw sort of the emotion of the story. Just my opinion on that. I felt kind of like I was jumping through a hoop, and just something I had to do to get to that last battle. Yeah,
definitely. It was a very video gamey moment, and it was like the only video gamey moment aside from the final battle. But it could have been done differently and much more effectively, I think.
I feel like, though, just because of how long it was, it almost felt like that was the final battle. Because when we get to the actual final boss, that was such an easy fight once you figured out what to do, that it was actually pretty disappointing. I mean, 3 hits to get rid of the shield and the 4th hit to kill her?
Something like that, but it did take a while to get those 4 hits in, right?
Yeah, but even with that, it just felt you compare it to the, I know we're trying not to compare too much, but to the ending of Shadow of the Colossus, the fight there, and such a big difference in difficulty for the battles. And then this, the final battle is just like, okay, well, I figured out what to do, and now just rinse and repeat for 3 more times, and I'm done the game.
I mean, I guess it's, it couldn't really have been any different, because you do have that light magic sword, and the queen is obviously dark magic, so you do already have that upper edge on her. So it's only going to be a matter of time. It's not really a matter of how, but just a matter of when you're going to get rid of her.
Yeah, though I have to say I really like the visuals in that fight, like the shockwave effect and the spreading of the particles around the things that are defending you.
Yeah, definitely. Did you guys realize that once you had that sword, you could just walk right up to the queen, or were you still hiding behind those idol statues?
Took me a while to realize that, but I figured that out about halfway through the fight.
Oh, okay. No, I hid behind the statues the whole time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely would have made it a lot more difficult, because once I realized that, then I realized, well, I can just run to the sword and I don't have to run back. As long as I can just run halfway there, then I'm safe.
I'm sure you were aware that you could pull and push the statues, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that helped a lot, especially when the sword was hit really far back, I think, for the final hit on the shield there, and you had to go down the stairs a couple steps farther.
Mm-hmm.
That one really helped having this.
I think it was like a 5-hit battle, but 3 of those 5 hits were with the sword really far at the back of the room.
Something like that, yeah.
So I had to stay behind those statues most of the time.
Yeah, I as far as the final battle was concerned, I didn't feel. I mean, I felt that it was a fairly simple battle, of course, but in essence, to me, the game was a puzzle game, so it didn't bother me as much that this wasn't some difficult battle as the final battle in Shadow of the Colossus.
That's true, but I feel like because it is a puzzle game, they could have introduced a little more puzzle elements or just something to make it more difficult, but it felt very straightforward.
I just found that whole ending sequence to be more symbolic than anything. Like, it didn't have to be, could have been a difficult battle, could have been an easy battle, but it's the symbolism behind it that was most important.
That's true. It's definitely the main point there.
And there was a lot of symbolism in that final battle. When you first strike her and get thrown back, you lose one of your horns. I guess you guys saw that as well. Yeah. So, and there was sort of the evolution, and I guess was it the final strike you lose your second horn, right?
Right.
And they're both like broken off by the end. So
that was where you get knocked into the wall, unconscious.
Right, and there's this feeling that you can now possibly rejoin society, without that, sort of outer appearance.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I played
before. There's sort of an evolution of that character as well, which is a part of that final battle. So I think that the final battle, to me, had the intended effect. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't very long. Kind of, average length sort of battle. But, with the game, I felt like it fit.
Definitely.
With the rest of the game. And so I thought it was very appropriate for that reason.
Yeah, I guess most of the fights throughout the game were kind of the same. Like, once you figured out what to do, it was simple, it was just tedious. So it did fit in that respect. I just, at the time, I was kind of like, oh, that's it? Like, there's nothing else? But I did enjoy it, like the visuals and the story aspects of it. It was good. It was just, from a game's perspective, it wasn't quite as exciting, I guess.
Yeah. How about you, Shawn? How did you feel about the final battle?
I thought it was fine. I didn't realize that hitting the shield was doing anything at first, and I think I died or something, and I was like, what am I supposed to do?
But that's true. That happened to me too.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, it's obviously not doing anything because your sword goes flying out of your hands. You know what I mean? So I kind of didn't get it at first, but I'm with you guys that it was just kind of like it was more about the kind of like we said about all the combat in the game. It just serves the story, and this is the climax, and it caps off the story. Like, this is your main antagonist. You got to fight her. It's a little bit, cliched or classic or, video gamey or whatever, especially in the context of this game. Having a final boss battle is kind of weird after all that what we've talked about, but I didn't have a problem with it per se. Like, it was fine. I didn't like or dislike it. It made more sense to me than like fighting the spirits of the shadows right before it, just like you guys were saying.
Yeah. I agree that some puzzle elements probably would have helped. Some sort of puzzle elements to the final battle might have helped the transition from puzzle to sort of action adventure be a little more seamless, I guess, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
But so the queen is, of course, you dispatch the queen, and then you move on with the rest of the story, and fairly interesting. kind of a bizarre ending. Again, one of the things that I really liked about the game is how the beginning you're brought in on this boat, and the villagers or whoever that are bringing you in are using that sword to sort of open up the doors and everything. And that's sort of, again, something I really liked about the game I spoke about earlier was how it sort of falls back on itself. And you're actually going through that chamber. You actually see the boat that they bring to the island or the fortress in. And I just think that's really cool. And then we see it in the ending as a shadowy figure, which is obviously Yorda, definitely a female presence, someone who cares a lot about us, is toting our body around and putting us in the boat and getting us out of there before basically the castle crumbles.
Yeah, like I said earlier, and I really like how you go from saving her throughout the game to at the end she ends up being the one to save you. And it's kind of a bit of a reversal there, just like you said, going back on itself.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was a really beautiful moment, in that I guess this is the spirit of Yorda that carries Ico out to the boat and casts the boat into the water. And it's the way I interpret it was that this was Yorda's way of saying, thank you for everything you did for me. Like we didn't succeed in the end, but thank you. I am grateful for the time we have spent together. Which
I think you did sort of succeed. It's just in a different way than you had planned.
Well, the way I saw it was that this is Yorda's spirit, so she's either just entombed in that petrified state, forever, and the fortress is crumbling, so that's the end of her, and she's sending you off so that you can live. You sacrificed yourself for her, and now she's doing that for you.
Yeah,
because you've created that bond between each other, and just sort of like at that moment. In my mind, I was thinking of the main title theme song, which is called "You Were There," and it really
through the credits as well.
Yeah, and it plays through the credits too, and it just that phrase, not even necessarily the whole song, but that phrase really encapsulates that final moment where Yorda's spirit, or if that's Yorda herself, carries Ico out of the castle and casts him out in the boat.
Yeah, it's just like, thank you, you were there for me, kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
And but then we get to the credits, and everything's been destroyed, which I feel like the Queen's power was what was holding the castle together, like I mentioned earlier. As she's weakening, everything was kind of crumbling. Throughout the game, you see all the ruins, and then at the end, she dies, and the whole castle dies with her.
Right.
But then the credits end, and you wash up on a beach. And past the credits, you get a little bit of gameplay, which is something you don't often see in many games.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note on the whole credit sequence itself. Just doing that like almost chronological order of just aerial shots of every place you visited really gave you that sense of closure and really gave you that sense of like, we did come a long way.
I always like when games give a retrospective like that.
Yeah, it's nice.
But the hands-on gameplay after the credit.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Just being able to explore this beach, and it's kind of a paradise compared to what you had been in so far. And you're walking along, and at the end you end up finding Yorda. She's washed up on the shore.
Yeah.
She says something, and then the game just kind of fades to black.
That was an unusual moment for me. Just for one, waking up on the shore, and I think Ico has a really neat animation that he kind of just flops out of the boat.
Yeah, that was funny.
Which it kind of goes with like he's been physically damaged by this whole ordeal. But when I ended up on the shore, I thought like, is this it? I'm alone. It's. I'm glad to have experienced everything that I did. I'm glad to be free. I'm glad to have done all of this with Yorda, but she's gone and I'm alone. And, these cliff walls look so menacing and ominous 'cause they're so tall, and I thought this is the end of Ico.
Well, you kind of get a feeling though, like it's a new chance at life. Though I mean, the horns are gone now.
It is it is a bit of a new beginning too, but it's a new beginning that you start off with a bit of I don't know how to describe it. It's bittersweet. You're
Yeah.
I'm sure Ico can be excited to be able to reintegrate into society, but it's without this person that he's grown so attached to.
But then you run into her, and I don't know. It seemed like it seemed like sort of a bailout to me. I don't know. I think I was kind of happy with the ending as it was before running up the beach and running into her. I don't know, and that's sort of my personality, I guess, with movies and things like that. I don't like the movies and the narratives that are tied up in a little bow at the end. And not that I'm saying this was, because I think there's still a lot of questions and concerns that we have for these characters, in their future. But at the same time, I sort of thought I might have been able to do without that. I think I had kind of accepted the fate, and that this girl had sort of made the ultimate sacrifice for me to help me, start afresh and anew and continue to live, and I was okay with that ending.
I feel like the after credits thing almost felt like they were trying to leave themselves an out if they ever wanted to do a sequel or something like that, because this was their first game, and it felt like they were just leaving themselves an opening there where they could elaborate on some further story between these two characters if they wanted to.
Yeah, maybe, who knows. But I just thought, washing up on that shore and then finding Yorda's body was just such a shocking moment. It's, at least you're not going to be alone, right? So it's...
I definitely was in awe at the end.
I just had this, I really felt like I'm genuinely grateful that Ico can be with Yorda again, but how is she here? Like, how is it that I thought she crumbled with the castle?
Just like, actually, when you fall off the bridge after she's tried to rescue you earlier in the game, and you're like, wait, how did I survive? And like, you appear on those big circular cage things, and you're like, I just fell like 1,000 feet. I don't know how I survived this. It's kind of the same thing here, but now with Yorda instead of Ico.
Yeah, and it really just adds to these sort of the fairy tale mystique that we spoke about before. There's these moments of action that are unexplainable. How do you fall? How do you live through that? How does she end up washing up on the beach? There's your sort of your happy ending. At least they have each other. Not necessarily the happily ever after, but at least they still have each other, and so that just kind of draws into that as well.
Yeah, it turned it from a tragedy to a bit more of a fairy tale.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we've sort of just discussed the game and talked about it, which I think we've done a pretty comprehensive job of talking about the game. As you mentioned, we have this ending, and it leaves things sort of open ended for Team Ico to make a new game, and we know that next release was, of course, Shadow of the Colossus. So I think we should maybe speak about, obviously, there's some sort of relationship between these two games. I mean, there are tropes, and there are similarities of the characters that exist in both games, and so I don't know if the puzzle fits completely together nicely. But I think all of us probably our wheels were turning in our heads as we're playing this game, and I'd like to get just sort of everyone's thoughts on how these sort of games interconnect the storylines.
I think for me the main connection there is the horns on the boy. Like I think that's the main thing, because at the end of Shadow of the Colossus there, which is the prequel, you have the young boy there, like the kind of de-evolution of the main character with the horns, and it feels to me like the boys that you see in the castle in Ico are descendants through the ages from this past person who created this sin that carried through his lineage. And I feel like the villagers remember, or at least the village elders remember what kind of what happened in the past, and they don't want to have that repeat.
Do you think this was sort of like as we know at the end of Shadow of the Colossus, our main character, gosh, what's the name? Wander is pulled in to this void and sort of turned into this baby with horns.
Mm-hmm.
That's is transformed into that. Do you think that possibly being a prequel, that this was sort of this, he was turned into this baby as sort of a reminder of tempting the fates, and that from then on, other babies were possibly born with this, I guess,
defect.
This omen.
Defect. This would be a good term. Yeah, is sort of a reminder of things past.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's sort of how I sort of drew the games together.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought too. Just something to make sure it doesn't happen again. Something that the elders can do to kind of keep the people in check. It's like, all right, we'll get rid of these bad omens, and our village will be safe for another year or whatever.
I initially came into Ico thinking that this is a sequel to Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, really?
I came in thinking that this boy is the horned baby from Colossus.
Or sorry, yeah, no, I
Yes.
agree. Yeah, that's how it actually is. Sorry, I misinterpreted what you said there. Yeah, this is the sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you never played the other one before and just seen like the cover and seeing the horns on the cover of Ico? I felt the same way, Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the opening moments, and it's I don't know why this isn't explicitly told in the game, but I believe it's in the manual, and it's definitely on. I actually think that Ico's website is still active, so I think it's actually on the Ico website, and it says that once every 100 years a horned boy is born, which is a bad omen, and it's to remind the community of, you name it, past sins, past transgressions, whatever you want to interpret. So, that kind of, you can sort of use that to tie into Shadow as well, but I do think that these two games are standalone experiences and standalone stories, that if there's any connection, it's just the geography of the two. Maybe they could be happening on the same continent, or they could just be perhaps happening on the same world.
Yeah, I'll say even before playing Ico, I was thinking that maybe the castle or the dungeon that you were escaping from was the same castle, because I made that connection at the beginning with the bridges,
Mm-hmm.
the bridge that transverses like the skyline in Shadow of the Colossus. So I thought, maybe these are the same places, but obviously they're not. I just tend to agree that this is, that these horn boys are just sort of a reminder, sort of past transgression, and that's about as connected as these two games are. But I think that's appropriate. That's enough. I don't think they need to create an entire mythology, but just having just a sort of bits and pieces of that is to sort of tie in the two games from the same developer. It's nice. I think it's nice, and I'm hoping that when those other games come out, please, that we'll maybe see some we'll maybe see some more of that, right? I mean, I think it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful when developers and designers can do that. I mean, they've made their mark in these two games, and they're just so beautiful and fascinating. Of course, of course people are clamoring for more.
Mhm.
I mean, people that
Right.
really appreciate games that are beautiful and fun to play and just well done. I mean, who wouldn't want more of this?
Yeah, yeah. Ueda and his team have definitely created a very memorable world and mythology and culture within their games, and they don't have to be connected. Like I don't think they are. I'm sort of led to think that the rest of us don't exactly think that they're connected. Maybe very loosely, and if you want to make the connections, then they're perhaps happening on adjacent continents or something like that. But they do relate to each other while not being directly related, and they do relate, or I should say they're not directly connected, but they relate in the sense that they both happen within the same set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we've sort of put the two games together, compared them, see if there was any relation, and I like where we've ended up with this. But just kind of going back to both games, I think my kind of final question and what I'd like everyone to talk about, if you had to choose, between Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, which game did you prefer?
Shadow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was quick.
That was just you were definitive about that.
I was about to say how tough of a decision it was, but apparently not.
Yeah, no, for me it was pretty clearly Shadow of the Colossus. I don't know, just everything about it felt more polished, and I didn't feel really frustrated by anything in that compared to this, where it was occasional moments of wow, this is awesome, and then a lot of moments of this is really frustrating.
Can I just remind you of Malice?
Yeah,
He was a giant headache. I think when I did that battle, it took 2 hours or 3 hours.
that's true, but even with that, it's still like the whole time you're thinking, oh, this is just like epic fight.
Right, and after that 2 hours, aren't you so satisfied that you took them down?
Oh no, I agree, and that's exactly the intent of that whole set piece. But no, I think if you're gonna talk about being frustrated within a game, yeah, I was definitely frustrated with the Malice fight.
Yeah.
If it's really hard to say which one I prefer over the two, because they're both so fantastic, and I both like them very much, but for different reasons, and both games set out to achieve very different things, and that's why I like them as two related things, as well as two separate entities. But since the question is which one would you say you prefer, I would say that I preferred Ico because it was more laid back experience. It was a more meditative thing. Playing this, it was enriching, and I could learn something about myself because I had the opportunity to go through this journey.
Yeah.
That's deep, man.
He's a deep guy, ladies. But I'm kind of with you, Floyd. I mean, in the sense that I don't think that I know this is a horrible way to get out of this, but you know what? It's my question, so I can do what I want. I really feel like I couldn't choose between the two if I had to choose, being such vastly different games. But I will make a distinction in this. If I had to say, if someone asked me, hey, I'm thinking about playing one of these two games, which one should I play first? I would always say, I guess it would depend on the person, first of all, but I would probably recommend Shadow of the Colossus first. Just because it's so awesome, it's so enriching, it's so action packed, and it's just so cool and badass. And just to get someone hooked, I think that Shadow of the Colossus is a better primer for Ico than Ico being a good primer for Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh,
if
I
that
completely
makes sense.
agree. And like I'm happy that I was able to play Shadow before Ico, because if it had been the other way around, I think I would have entered Shadow of the Colossus with a lot of apprehension.
Wow. I have a lot of mixed feelings about what you guys are saying right now. Like I'm
Well,
like
okay,
half agreeing with you and half not
Okay.
feeling.
Well,
It's weird.
Let's hear your 2
Let
cents
it
on
fly.
this.
Well, I'm thinking like if I were gonna tell somebody, okay, like which Team Ico game would you play first? I've on the one hand I would say Ico because it's shorter and the mechanics are simpler, and with Shadow of the Colossus, I like thinking about it. I like that game more. That was more of a game for me, but
Yeah.
objectively, I'm not sure which game is better because, like we've been saying, it's not that one game is a realization. Like Shadow of the Colossus is not a realization of promises made by Ico. As Rich has explained, they're more like a yin and yang to each other than they are some kind of improvement. You know, and not to say there weren't improvements, because there are in any, as technology and the development team learns more and everything. But I don't know. I just think, like, after thinking about it, I would put my vote with I liked Shadow of the Colossus more, even though like I actually put that game down for like a year because I was stuck on one of them. I can't remember which one, but I just stopped playing that game for a long time and went back to it and was really glad I was able to finish it. But I don't think I was ever stumped in that game of what to do. Whereas like almost 100% of any frustration I had with Ico was that, again, I'm just not good at environmental puzzles. So for me as the audience, I would say Shadow. But if somebody was saying, well, I want to get into these games, I think I would say play Ico first, because most people are into that kind of stuff, like, or I think most gamers can handle it better than I could, and it's a shorter game, and you have that little emotional connection and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I think I have to agree there, because for me, I tend to recommend starting on the earlier games in the series, or even where it's not a series, like it's just from the same developer, because the mechanics that they've been fine-tuning and everything, and their method of development, it just all improves later on, for the most part anyways, with games like these. And
Right.
So I feel like it's better to kind of start on the one that's not quite as polished and then finish off with the better one. So then the memories you leave with from both games are more likely to have a better memory because you'll be ending on the better of the two games.
Right. And
At least
picture
that's how I see it.
if you have a friend and you tell him or her to play Ico, and then he or she finishes Ico and says, "Wow, that was really great." Then you get to say, well, wait until you try Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, and you couldn't
Like
do
go
that
for
the other way
crescendo
around.
kind of, yeah, the other way around. It's like you're starting off great and then getting like to the one that's good, but it's not as great.
Right.
Well, see, my thing is, I think I could be completely wrong on this, but I feel like the more modern gamer is more of the action adventure gamer. I mean, it's sort of reflective in games like, the Call of Duty series, the shooty shoots, the action adventure, the more, I want to say more violent type games, titles like Grand Theft Auto and things like that. So I feel like
Even The Last of Us as well.
yeah. And I feel like the more modern gamers is more, into that type of atmosphere, which I think Shadow of the Colossus lends itself more to. And so it would honestly, it would depend on my audience, but I would say that, that would be the majority audience of the more modern gamer. And for that reason, I would probably choose that one first. And I think with that game, yeah, the action adventure's awesome. You love it, but I think the whole cinematic, the whole minimalistic approach to the game, the beauty in that game unfolds itself in a way to where it really prepares you to play something as beautiful as Ico. And so for that reason, that's why I would, suggest, Shadow of the Colossus first, because it gives you a taste of it, but Ico is by far a more reflective and sort of beautiful game that I think playing that secondary to me works better. And I feel that way. I feel like that's why I'm glad we went that route with the playthroughs. And I feel like I appreciated Ico more and was more excited about playing it after finishing Shadow of the Colossus, because I had originally thought, well, this is just sort of a get out of a tower game. How fun can that be? I mean, and so after playing Shadow of the Colossus, I mean, I was so primed to play Ico, and I think that's a lot of the reason, because of the just beauty and cinematic and minimalistic approach of Team Ico.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said, and I would make my recommendations for those same reasons. Like, to me, Shadow of the Colossus is, if I had to compare it to anything, it's like going into the gym and doing a hell of a workout, and then Ico is just that really relaxing soak in a hot tub or sauna or something like that.
He likes hot tubs, ladies. Sorry.
But no, I think if somebody just stopped me on the street and said, I play video games, I want to try something from the PS2 era, what do you recommend? I would recommend Shadow first, and then I'd just say, like, if you like that, try Ico, and just, if you don't like it, that's fine. If you do, that's great. But if they're more of a niche-y, reflective, easygoing type gamer, I'd put Ico as my primary recommendation. But I mean, given that the question was, which one would you recommend? I'd still go with Shadow for the exact same reasons that Rich has already listed.
Yeah, I guess I sort of partially agree with what you and Rich are saying, and partially with Shawn. It depends on the audience, and if it was someone who I thought that them playing Ico first might turn them off of Shadow, I would agree. I would go with Shadow first. But if it's someone who I thought that was a little bit more patient and willing to give Ico a try and also Shadow, no matter what they thought of Ico, then I think that the better way to go for me, anyways, is start with Ico and then go to Shadow, just from a development of the game mechanics and storyline kind of way. But yeah, I think if it was someone I was worried might just drop the developer altogether and not even touch Shadow after Ico, then I would probably more likely say just start with Shadow.
Yeah, I think Ico is also more accessible to a casual gamer. And because, like, you can do a puzzle or two, save your game, and then not touch it for a day or 2 days or a week.
Well, I was sort of thinking the opposite, that Shadow was a bit more accessible just because of the action. Like, Ico is so reflective, and I mean, to some people they would call it boring.
No, but like I mean to the casual gamer, somebody who just plays games a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe they don't have the the dexterity or the reflexes to do like a hardcore game, right?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Like they just want to drop in, drop out, have some fun, and call it a day for that game. Which is like, this is a tangent, but that's the same reason I'm really enjoying my time with Fez, because I can turn it on for an hour, collect some cube pieces, turn it off, and feel satisfied. It's just like with Ico, I can start playing, do a puzzle. If that's all the time that I have, that's fine. I can turn off the game and feel satisfied. If I playing through Shadow of the Colossus, I really you get a huge adrenaline rush, and you feel like you're on a roll, and you want to do more than one boss in one sitting, right?
All right. Well, I think if there's nothing else anyone has to talk about, that probably about wraps it up.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you joining us. Again, something we mentioned before the call and didn't mention this time. This was one of those games that all four of us actually played, and it was just a really neat experience. Hearing people say that they were done with the game, and just a lot of fun. I mean, just very interactive. A few of us were kind of texting back and forth or sending PMs to each other about just our experience and how much we were enjoying the game. And or as in Shawn's case, I was got a kick out of hearing Shawn's frustrations about the game, but am ultimately really happy that he had a favorable review of the game.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was sort of you just went 180, and it was amazing, and I thought that was really cool and says a lot.
Yeah, you went
about this
from
game.
disliking the whole thing to just being in love with it, which that's awesome.
Again, maybe I got to get better about not. I got to get better about not just posting when I'm mad. I think that I'm
no, please do keep doing that.
No, there are certainly times when I'm frustrated by the games that we're playing, but I really have to temper myself and because I love it. I shouldn't say I loved Ico. I certainly enjoyed my time with it, especially looking back because right now I'm not jumping off cliffs and getting having monsters come after me. I'm left more with the themes and the story and everything because as Floyd was saying earlier, part of the story for me is not Ico diving off a cliff and missing the chain 3 times. The story is that we made it through and escaped. So even, especially in retrospect, the game is really sitting well with me. So I just got to get better about how I comment on a game while we're playing it.
I think about your, I think it was a PM you sent after we first talked about doing the recording for this segment. And you're just like, oh, this should be an easy recording. Ico sucks. Or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean it. Or if I meant it at the time, I definitely am not staying with that opinion. But anyway, we're digressing. Let's Rich get back to wrapping up the show.
Before we do our final wrap up, I just want to thank everybody for sitting through 2 hours of us yabbering about this game and for participating in the playthrough. It was a lot of fun to chat and play this game with you guys. I actually really, really enjoyed this game to such an extent that I went out on Etsy and ordered myself a Ico t-shirt. And a bit of an unfortunate mistake happened that I was mailed a girl's shirt, which I've cleared that up with the seller and now have the appropriate gender shirt. But I would like to gift that shirt that I was inadvertently mailed to one of our listeners to gift to one of their significant others because the holiday season is approaching. And I will send out the shirt and make correspondence to the first person to comment in the wrap-up forum thread. All you have to say is, you were there.
All right. Well, thanks, Floyd. That's really nice. It's a really generous gift to give out to one of our listeners, and I'm sure someone out there will appreciate it. Thank you very much. So that wraps up our discussion for the modern side in September, our playthrough of Ico. Thanks, guys, for joining us. That was a great discussion of the game.
That was.
And in October, we will be playing the Xbox 360 and PC thriller, Alan Wake, and Floyd will be hosting that.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be scary.
Well, that concludes episode 6 of the RFGeneration Community Playthrough Wrap-Up. I want to thank everyone who participated this month and joined us in our playthroughs. Please remember that you can find our discussion page on rfgeneration.com. We'd love to hear any additional thoughts you may have on these playthroughs, or you may leave feedback for our podcast. Please join us next month as we play Castlevania Symphony of the Night on the retro side. I will be hosting that. And on the modern side, Floyd will be hosting Xbox 360 and PC exclusive Alan Wake. Should be a very spooky month. Again, very special thank you goes out to our co-host on the Suikoden II podcast, Mr. Sir Psycho. We really appreciate him joining us. And again, thank you for listening to our show. Until next time, happy gaming.